now like to take just a few seconds to, we just had the 20th anniversary of September 11th events that happened in 2001, and I would like to just take a small moment of silence for all those folks and those heroes that lost their lives that day.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Thank you. All right, that was Miss Amy Lynn Holt. She is going to be joining us from Florida today, and she's going to be online. So we are going to be doing all voice votes on anything that we have an action item on. And Amy, can you hear us?
I can.
All right, good deal. Matt, you guys good to go in the back? All right. First up is going to be the agenda approval. I'll take a motion when someone's ready. Anybody?
Motion that we approve the agenda for September 13th, 2021.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Bridges, is that a yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff? Yes. Ms. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis and Ms. Holt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Agenda's approved. First up is going to be our program highlights. This was going to be Dr. Wendy Fry. She's not going to be with us today. So we have Dr. Bryant with us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craven and members of the board. And again, I apologize for not being Dr. Wendy Fry. She is smarter and sharper than I am. And so stepping in her stead, I'd like to share just a little bit about this work before Mr. Grubmeyer shares with us in depth the continuation of it. But this is, in fact, the first year that we have been required to develop a social mental health plan. And a little bit later, we'll be seeking board approval for that. But it really is a pleasure to share with this board and the public and the community about the important work that we had been doing much prior to it being a statutory requirement under law in North Carolina. In fact, we'd already had a framework in place for service and support for students, really thinking about the full child and the whole child and the way in which we serve and support those children. And this new requirement from the Department of Public Instruction has streamlined and reinforced that very work. If I could take a moment as well to brag on our Director of Student Services, Mr. Matt Grubmeyer, is an exceptional leader of this work. When you think about the liaison that he serves between our social workers, our school counselors, our school support personnel, and every agency in the community that really rows in this same direction, Mr. Grubmeyer and his team have been leading professional development and learning opportunities for staff in order that they would be front runners among the Western region when it comes down to how we, as Henderson County Public Schools, are carrying the torch, if you will, for service and support to students. In fact, it was his work that helped to lead mental health and first aid and trauma-sensitive school training among our staff. Another way in which we have really been front runners in this, in June of 2020, our staff had already begun work on suicide prevention protocols and risk mitigation protocols, because we know what it is about. It's about recognition in students and families, those areas that might be of concern and risk. And so as we prepare to get started here today, Mr. Grubmeyer is going to be talking about this work explicitly. He's going to be sharing with you about the work that Henderson County Public Schools is doing to support mental health improvement, and again, helping you to have a clear picture of the work that you will be considering when you approve the plan that we present. And so at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Grubmeyer to come to the microphone. And again, please recognize Mr. Grubmeyer as one of the senior and forefront leaders in this work in our community. We're fortunate to have him. Thank you, sir.
Well, certainly I will not live up to those expectations. And thank you very much for your gracious introduction, Dr. Bryant. So the information on this slide has already been reviewed by our superintendent. We concentrate in our department, as we do across the school system, on the whole child. We see this legislation and the board policy that followed it from our state board as a continuation of our work, including those things that Dr. Bryant mentioned around trauma-sensitive schools and youth mental health first aid. And so we are eager to continue that work. And we also see this as an opportunity to continue to collaborate with the community partners without whom we could not do this work. We could not do this work on our own. Here's some background items, of course, that have also been reviewed by the superintendent. I am particularly proud of the work that our team did on the suicide prevention protocol. That is very much a grassroots effort on the part of my colleagues, and I very much appreciate them and their hard work on that. And then we've done the same thing on the plan that is in front of you tonight, board, for your approval. That plan has been written by student services representatives along with some representatives from the EC department. So when it comes to the required school mental health improvement policy itself, it starts with an initiative that includes a mandate that public schools put all hands on deck for mental, social, and emotional wellness. We know that a positive school climate has the potential to lift the spirits and the achievement of all students. We know from the research that a meaningful, supportive relationship is the single most supportive it's the single thing that is likely to support children when they are facing the symptoms of mental illness, anxiety, depression, suicidal behaviors. We also know that it's not a big change for school staff. The traditional practices that are called for in this plan, such as welcoming students as they enter our classrooms, help students learn more, but welcoming rituals also set the stage for students to turn to their teachers when they need help in other ways as well. Apologize in advance for all the words on this slide, right? But we felt like it was important at this time to provide to the board some more information on social and emotional learning. The CASEL definition of social and emotional learning makes the connections to school easy to see. When a young person establishes an identity as a successful student, manages her emotions just before a big exam, shows empathy for her classmates and teachers, gets along well with others, and makes good decisions about working hard, not only does she do better in school, but she's better set up for success after graduation. I think it's also important to note that social and emotional learning is part of the official North Carolina school curricula. Again, it's easy to see the connections to the core goals of school. When students know how to act responsibly, make connections between school and career, communicate, especially when it's difficult to, be respectful, self-directed, and contribute to a team, students, teachers, and schools are more successful and more positive places to be. Let me pause right there and ask if the board has any questions about our first couple slides on the requirements of the plan just generally or around social and emotional learning. Any questions? Okay. Hearing none, let's move on to early intervention. So the state school board policy and the legislation acknowledges the fact that not all students are the same. Like with instruction, not all students will be okay emotionally simply by attending a school that is safe and has caring and competent teachers. They need additional support sometimes, just like a student might need Tier 2 instructional scaffolding. These students benefit when schools provide extra support for students who consider drug use or who become anxious or depressed. To that end, all of our schools have mental health leadership teams whose task it is to identify students who need more help and build collaborative teams around those students to provide it. Finally, it might seem a disconnect to see the word crisis intervention in a slide about early intervention. What we have found is that skillful reaction when there is a crisis in our schools or community helps us to support students who may become more vulnerable when there is a student death, a staff illness, or another upsetting circumstance. Sometimes early intervention is not enough. Sometimes we need to make referrals when students need additional support. I recently had an opportunity to publicly express my gratitude about where I live and work, and this slide helps to list why. Complying with these new expectations from DPI is easy in a community like ours, with so many forward-thinking and collaborative partners. As Dr. Bryant mentioned, long before the state asked us to improve access to school and community-based mental health services, our county commissioners and this school board helped us to secure school social workers, school-based therapists, and school-based crisis counselors from Blue Ridge Health. Thank you to our fine school leaders also, who quickly understood the importance of our school-based mental health leadership teams. Gratitude also to our school nurses, school social workers, and school counselors who have been such powerful architects and advocates for safety planning and taking good care of our students returning from a hospitalization or a crisis. Referral for treatment and helping students who return from extended absences is a current priority for us and a bright spot here in Henderson County. Unfortunately, as a later agenda item around the suicide resolution will attest, youth suicide continues to be a significant and scary issue in our country and in our community. With the help of our many community partners, including the Health Department, VIA, Family Preservation Services, the Hope Coalition, and our own Student Services colleagues, we have been successful creating a comprehensive guide to address students experiencing mental illness and or suicidal thoughts or behaviors. The protocol itself has 5 sections, and you can see that each of those sections on the screen there is noted by a separate bullet. Parts 1 and 2 help teachers and other school staff to create positive environments for students, recognize early warning signs of suicide, and refer to school colleagues for extra help. Parts 3 and 4, which are designed only for student services staff, help those folks assess student risk and refer to crisis counsels and other mental health providers when it's necessary. And then we're back to all hands on deck with Part 5. All staff then are responsible for helping care and support children who return after a crisis, such as a suicide attempt or a hospitalization. This is a big one, this suicide risk protocol. And so again, I just want to stop and ask if the board has any questions. So really, what's expected from us as a public school unit is really 2 things. To have an improvement plan for school mental health that comprises the items I've just gone through here. The core support for all kids, the early intervention for some, the referrals to school staff and outside providers for others, and then a requirement that we have a suicide prevention and risk mitigation protocol. But the second half of the law requires that there also be professional development and training plans for school staff. That part of the policy requires that public school units offer comprehensive training on a variety of student safety and mental health topics, including an overview of youth mental health as it relates to youth suicide prevention, substance use, teen dating violence, and the prevention of child physical abuse, sexual abuse, and sex trafficking. In addition, the state recommends that additional specialized training be provided for student services personnel on these same topics. Highlights of that training so far are a dynamic session earlier in the year with our friends from social services here in Henderson County, and 2 sessions last Friday with Professor Adam Lesser of the New York State Psychiatric Hospital and Columbia University, who also helped to author our suicide risk assessment protocol from the previous slide. So at this point, that concludes my section of the presentation. I would ask again, board, what questions do you have?
The 6 hours that they're required to do initially, how long do they have to take those PD time for that?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Craven. So we understand that the school year has a lot going on in the beginning. There's a lot of moving pieces, right? Right. And so we knew that in order to have the best from staff we needed to do two things. Allow extra time for staff that don't get to it before the school year begins, but also to communicate that to staff before the school year begins, so that prior to ever being in their classrooms or having any responsibility, that they could take advantage of the training that's been provided to them, and then maybe get trade time later for that.
Ms. Holt has a question for you. Go ahead, Amy.
Hi, Mr. Grubmeyer. I was wondering if you had any stats for youth North Carolina suicides in 2020.
So, Ms. Holt, I don't have a specific stat for North Carolina suicides in 2020. Generally, those statistics are at least 2 years delayed from any kind of official reporting. But I will tell you that in most calculations, experts tell us that suicide behaviors and suicidal ideation is 3 or 4 times worse in just the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, this is not a one-size-fits-all program. We understand that. Could you talk a little bit more about the positive curriculum of SEL? I know we are talking about the prevention part of it, but a lot of what I have read is talked about goal setting, goal maps, support systems, how to reach those positive goals. Do you think you could speak to that a little?
Yes, and Ms. Caskey, I'll start with my own classroom 25 years ago, right? I never did anything like that on the first day of school. I went ahead and taught my curriculum on the first day of school. I just felt like that was super important. But somewhere in that first week came that whole thing about, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you when you ask for help. I'm here to help you when I notice that you need help and you haven't asked yet. And so that starts that conversation around helping students manage school. We can't have it both ways. We can't have high expectations for kids and a demanding academic environment, right, even in the best of times, right, and then expect that we can just leave students to figure it out by themselves. So the goal setting, the managing emotions, the organization, recognizing when you're not well and making an effort to reach out for help. Those are things that we teach kids because they work better in school, but those things are also important, of course, doing well in life after school. Thank you for that question.
When you have a referral, is this paid for by the parent, paid for by whom?
So in this case, you get the award for asking the most difficult question so far. Thank you for that. It's one of the real barriers for students and families getting the care that they need when they need it. Because anybody that's navigated the current medical or mental health environment knows that the rules are not easy to follow. The answer to your question really is all of the above. If we make a referral to a Blue Ridge Health crisis counselor, that comes at no cost to that student. If we make a referral for school-based therapy to one of our many partners here in our community, then those providers will sometimes bill Medicaid if that's appropriate for that student. Sometimes they ask the parents to pay out of pocket, and sometimes they charge for those things not at all or on a sliding scale. The answer to your question really depends on the student and the family's particular insurance situation.
So we help them get Medicaid. We don't just say, well, you don't have the money. Too bad, kid. We do help them get it.
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, that's a very frequent thing that our very talented school social workers will help families with. A lot of times we'll have folks that move from out of state, for example, and they have Medicaid, but it's in another state. That's not a hard process, but it's a hard process when you've just made perhaps an unexpected move. You're trying to get your kids in school. You don't have your furniture yet. You haven't started a job yet. So our social workers are particularly skillful at helping families who qualify for Medicaid get that Medicaid, right? And a lot of times what that means is that they will meet that family down at social services and help them navigate the paperwork and answer those questions.
Okay, so let's say a parent won't ask for Medicaid and won't get that help. Can we still help these kids?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, it's frequently the case that when I pick up the phone and call one of our partners. Linda Davidson from Blue Ridge Health comes to mind right away. Linda, I have a kid and a family who really needs some help. I'm not even sure what their insurance situation is, but it's high priority. And Linda has many times moved heaven and earth to get students and their families the support that they needed well before we knew what their particular insurance circumstances were. Our arrangements with Crossnor also provide that they provide services to families regardless of that family's ability to pay. What we're basically doing with the commissioner money that I referenced before is we're subsidizing the cost of the care that Crossnor provides to those families so that they can make ends meet as a business, even when families don't have a way to pay for those services. Thank you. Dr. Bryant, are you going to finish this up, or have we finished?
Yes, sir, if you don't mind. Absolutely. As Mr. Germeyer moves to the final slide, I would share with the board again that one of the strengths of the leadership in our Student Services Department and this very work is about the highly skilled nature of the training that's associated with our staff. Our recognition to serve and support what individual students' needs are, to build on the successes of those students. You know, oftentimes in our own conversations, we talk about our best work is teaching kids what to do when they don't know what to do, right? That they are prepared for that space of uncertainty. But really, it's highlighting those strongest relationships that we have with students in order that we can recognize and facilitate and support their need. When we think about that, we can think of individual stories. One, in fact, I'll share with you from this very summer. The period of fully remote learning was especially difficult because it fractured so many of the relationships that we have with students and their families. And some students were feeling like being disengaged completely. Dropping out of school was the appropriate choice at that time. When we returned to face-to-face learning this year, we had opportunities to reconnect with those very students and re-engage them in school and move them toward paths to graduation. And it is because of this very work. It's because we have trained individuals who are directly attentive to the relationships that they have with students and families, and then recognizing how they serve and support those unique needs for every individual child. And again, while there is now a statutory requirement for the plan that will be brought to you later in the board meeting, it's powerfully important to remember, as we call back to our previous superintendent, who would always remind us, like, it is about the relationships that we have in our school communities. And so we're especially proud of this because this board has challenged us, as you see here in nearly the fourth paragraph from the bottom, or the fourth sentence from the bottom, to overcome and remove barriers. That's what you've tasked us with. Get the things out of the way that keep students and their families from being successful in the educational system. And certainly this plan is that work. And so I applaud Mr. Grubmeyer and his team, our school social worker, our school counselors, the men and women who serve and support our students, our classroom teachers, because it is that village approach when we talk about partner agencies and commitments to individual students that allow us to be successful with them. So thank you for that work, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. I'll be sure to pass your compliments on to the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, we have board chair observations. I'm going to skip that for now and move on to board member observations. Mrs. Holt, do you have any observations you'd like to share with us?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Anyone else? Nope. All right. Next is going to be public comments. We have 50 public comments today. Which is a new record, I think, at least since I've been here. So what we're going to do is two things. Normally we leave 3 minutes for public comments, but we only have 30 minutes inside of our policies to do public comment. We're going to cut those down to 1 minute apiece for all of the public comments, and so we'll have all 50 people be able to express their whatever they came here to talk about. We also, I'm going to break down, we had 72 digital submissions. Let me see if I can find this. We had 42 people wanting us to keep the mask mandate. 2 people sent us an email asking to remove the masks. 19 emails regarding Tom Orr in the auditorium. We had 2 that would like us to go to all virtual, 1 that wants us to mandate vaccines, 1 that wants us to close schools, 2 thank yous, and 1 that says the health department's not doing their job. So that was the 71 that we received today, so all in total we've got 121. Before anybody comes to speak, I want to remind everybody to give everybody the time and the appropriateness to speak whatever they came here to say. I will not take anybody jeering, yelling, screaming, saying whatever to folks that came here to say, no matter what issue you're on or what side or whatever. We're going to respect everybody in this room, and we're going to hear everybody that decided to sign up today, okay? Matthew, you got 1 minute on the clock. All right, first up is going to be Mr. Eric Gash. Welcome. Come right up to the podium and make sure that green light is on when you're there, please, sir.
Thank you. My name is Eric Gash, former principal at Bruce Drysdale and graduate of Hendersonville High School. I wanted to first say thank you to the teachers, custodians, and bus drivers, teacher assistants, and all those who put in and make that hard sacrifice to make this possible. Their time on their weekends, holidays, nights, making sure that the classrooms and everything is clean. Now, our representative, Mr. Cawthorn, here is the last person we need coming in here telling us how to take care of our kids. He didn't show up in the last 18 months, and he repeatedly voted against relief for schools, and he spread misinformation about the deadly virus, and now he wants to storm into here and tell us how to take care of our kids, and I don't think so. And I think to Dr. Bryant, to the board, I want to say thank you. Know that we support you. Know that we have your back. We trust you. You make your decisions based on fact and not fiction. You base it on data and not delusions, and on people and not politics. So thank you for standing strong and being courageous. Thank you.
All right. That's exactly what I was just talking about 1 minute ago. Let's just keep it moving. Maggie Brindle-Watt. Brindle-Watt? I believe that's her name? She's outside? Okay. We'll wait for her to come in. Next is going to be, after Ms. Brindle-Watt, is going to be Ann Ferguson, as soon as Ms. Brindle-Watt comes in. And any student that would like to speak, I'm going to give them the full 3 minutes as well. Welcome. You have 1 minute, ma'am.
All right. So my name is Maggie Brindle-Watt. I have been a resident of Henderson for the last 17 years, and I have never been to this type of assembly. But what I have witnessed from you all have been a disgrace, and it's disgusting. Okay? You all know science. Well, I don't need to tell you anything. You know, science has shown us that 99.9% is the survival rate for this virus. And all I have to say to you is I have 30 seconds, is unmask our kids, because I can barely breathe in this mask, yelling at all of you, which you don't care, okay? PCR test is faulty, and you're making your decision upon that. Now, I don't know where you are, what you have hold in your heart, but each one of you will have to answer to God. And whatever decision you make here, you will have to answer to him. And I promise you, he will ask you, why didn't you do the right thing? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Ann Ferguson. Ms. Ferguson? Welcome.
My name is Ann Udy Ferguson, and I'm a product of the Hendersonville school system. Good English teachers tell their students to write about what they know. So what I did write that you're not going to hear too much about is how studying theater and English under Tom Orr has majorly impacted my life. After I left here, I went to the University of Georgia. I graduated summa cum laude because I had a good role model who worked his tail off, and all of ours as well. And after that, I graduated as an interior designer with a lot of art and architectural history. I worked at major firms in Atlanta, and I was always the one being promoted. And to the point that Coca-Cola came to our firm and said they would give us their $1 million square foot project if I would manage it. I had a BFA, not an MBA, but I had learned from a master how to work and do a good job. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I do hope that you will name the auditorium, not the building, but the auditorium. Helps you with the sticky part.
Thank you, Ms.
After
Ferguson.
Tom
We appreciate
Ford.
it. Thank you very much.
You.
All right, next up is going to be Aaron Fishler. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for all the work you've been doing. My name is Aaron Fishler. I'm a registered respiratory therapist at Mission Hospital. I came here last month talking with you about how Mission has been handling the pandemic, and it has not been getting better. Our pediatric ICU is now half full of COVID patients. All of our adult ICUs are full to the brim. We are busting at the seams. We do not have the staff. We are tired, and I'm asking you guys to please continue with the mask mandates until we can get to a place where everybody is safer. I do want to say real quick, I appreciate Congressman Cawthorn coming out here. Sir, if you would like to discuss this, I would be happy to discuss it with you outside afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Sandy Carpenter. I'm sorry.
Classes that are glared over. So, but anyway, I'm Sandy Morgan Carpenter. I'm a Henderson County resident. I am a graduate of Hendersonville High School, and I'm a member of the alumni board at Hendersonville High School. So what I want to do is convince you that you're not setting a precedent by naming this auditorium after Tom Orr. You've got the Jim Pardue Gym, you've got Tom Pryor Gym, but there have been great teachers that have come through Henderson High School. I know that, but they would be here tonight supporting Tom Orr if they could be. Tom, when he graduated and then he retired, he kept up with the community. He did plays. He did the clock on Main Street. He did the new historical courthouse. I could go on and on with what Tom Orr did. So I just ask that you would consider naming it. The community has spoken, and so I'd say name him for the community. And he was the only marshal of a teacher being the grand marshal in an Apple Festival parade. So the community has spoken. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Heather Reed, please. Welcome, Ms. Reed.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank the board for continuing to require masks in schools. COVID remains steeply on the rise, and your decision to require masks is allowing our schools to remain open. As we have seen in our neighboring counties in Polk, Mitchell, Graham, Madison, and beyond, switching to mask mandates and closing their doors to recover from high COVID numbers, we recognize how important it is to take every measure available to keep our kids in schools. We know, based on a study conducted in our own state by the ABC Science Collaborative, that proper masking is the most effective strategy to prevent secondary transmission in schools. We do not want to be in a situation in which too many teachers and staff members have fallen ill to allow schools to remain open. I want to commend my child's school, Bruce Drysdale, for their tireless work to increase distancing, cleaning, ventilating, and enforcing masks. I ask the board to ensure that our schools have the necessary resources to do this difficult work, and I ask that universal masking remain until the CDC, AAP, NCDHHS indicate that we are in a safer position to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Fletcher Griffith. After Fletcher will be John Brandon Olson.
You're really cramping my style with 1 minute.
I apologize, sir.
My name is Fletcher Griffith. Tom Orr was my teacher, my mentor, and most importantly, my friend. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Every time I think of Tom Orr, I think of these words. But what made Tom special? Tom had the uncanny ability to bring out in you that which you never knew you had. He prepared you for life by challenging you to take a risk, to go beyond what you perceive to be your limitations, to carefully choose the road in your life. Even the senior plays for which he was so well known were not really about the plays themselves. Rather, they were a challenge and an opportunity for seniors who would normally never consider doing such a thing to go beyond themselves. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Appreciate it.
The poem is not necessarily about the road not taken. It's about making choices. I challenge you to choose your road carefully.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Mr. Olson, followed by Tom Hill.
Thank you all. I have 3 children in Henderson County Schools. I appreciate I didn't have time to prepare a poster board with their pictures so you could see their smiling faces. They have, you'll have to imagine the most impressive, amazing, inspiring smiles you could ever see. I don't want to see their smiles covered up by a ventilator because we made a poor choice today. I want to see them smile on the wedding days, not suffering from some respiratory illness years past from something that happened because we make a bad decision today. I implore you to maintain the mask requirements as you've rightly put them in place. We were so relieved to see that you had. And please take the time to consider the folks that are coming here asking you not to, or to make a change. They have no respect for the rules you have. Your gavel fell. Mr. Rhodes was listening to Mr. Our social director, and they walk right up. They ignore your gavel. They ask questions and interrupt. They pull tape out of the way and sit down. They had to be escorted out by our good sheriff's department because they don't like the rules imposed on them. Shame on them, and please maintain the mask requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Mr. Hill and Ann Corbin will follow Mr. Hill. Welcome, Mr. Hill.
I'm okay. Make a grand entrance.
Not the first time, is it, sir?
No, it's not. I thank you for the honor of speaking. I graduated from Hendersonville High School in 1956. I was president of the student body and valedictorian of my class. I'm here to try to ensure that you name the auditorium in the name of Tom Orr. Tom was like a year behind me at high school and was an outstanding human being as well as student. And I think it would be an honor to the school to name the facility after him. And I have a speech here that I prepared, and I can't hardly give my name in 3 minutes, let alone this.
If you hand that to him, we'll take that from you. Yes, sir.
I want to give you, and I'm giving the speech on behalf of Furman Council, my good friend. We both graduated in 1956. Tom graduated a year, I think, after we did. He was a good student, a good human being, and I really endorse his.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Ann Corbin, followed by Phil Gross III. Welcome, Ms. Corbin.
I'm Ann Corbin. I do middle school instructional support for the ESL department, and I'm also a parent of a 10th grader at Hendersonville High School. I wanted to say thank you, school board, for basing your mask in schools decisions on local health data rather than bullying or misinformation. Thank you for recognizing masking as a community health issue. Thank you to the senior leadership for being physically present on campuses during the first week of school. We would love to have you and members of the school board on our campuses anytime, helping model what it means and looks like to take care of each other. As a Henderson County employee, I urge you to please vote again to continue masking in schools, as it plays a key layer of protection for us. As we know, many of our facilities do not allow for extra layers, such as social distancing or increased ventilation. I serve several schools across the county. And there it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbin. Next up, Phil Gross, followed by Grace Smith.
My name is Phil Gross. I'm a graduate of Hendersonville, class of 66. I was lucky enough to have Tommy as my freshman English teacher, the first class that he taught at Hendersonville High School. Also, too, I know there's quite a few of you here that did go to Hendersonville, and a lot of people here in the audience. I tell you, Tom was a great guy, a good teacher, a hell of a strong teacher, but he was tough. He was a great director. I acted in 3 of his plays that he had, twice in state competition in Chapel Hill. But Tom, the man, he is just hard to beat. He would listen to us. He'd get on to us. He always was interested in you, your family, how you were doing. And me, I just thought the world of him, and he thought the world of my kids, my family, everybody. My son and I had a chance to talk to him a few months before he passed away, and it was just about like being in high school again. Please name the auditorium after Tommy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gross. Grace Smith, followed by Ann Smith.
I'm also a student, so I get 3 minutes.
You get 3 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, my name is Grace Smith, and I'm a freshman in one of the local high schools. I just want to say thank that the masks are a waste of time, because most kids in the school are not wearing them properly anyways. I see a lot of the kids in my class wearing their mask below their nose, and I do not see how this is going to stop the spread. Not to mention, all the research has been conducted proving that masks really don't work very well anyway. The teachers cannot keep up constantly having to correct kids because they're not wearing their masks properly. If they tried to do that, they would never get any teaching done. I personally have a lot of trouble breathing with the mask on. I have health issues such as anxiety. Also, I have vocal cord dysfunction. I have allergies which seem to have made the mask wearing worse. I do not know why allergies would be making the mask wearing worse, but they do. I seriously cannot breathe with it on. For some reason, it causes me to have more stuffiness in my nose, as well with runny nose. And like I have already stated, most kids are not even wearing them properly, or at least at high school level, because normally they wear them below their nose, which cannot be much protection. I also was very upset last week, and I felt embarrassed because my teacher sent me to ISS because I kept pulling my mask down below my nose so I could breathe, which is honestly very hard to breathe with them on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Ann Smith. She'll be followed by Katie Gash. Welcome, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, school board members and administration, for your leadership during this most difficult time for our schools. I'm Ann Smith, and I've been a pediatrician at Hendersonville Pediatrics for 21 years. I'm also a proud mother of 3, all of whom graduated from Henderson County schools. My son's still at Hendersonville High School. My husband, Jerry, is a board-certified teacher and city council member. I support your wise decision at the last meeting to make masks mandatory. As caregivers for children, we share a most important job: safety. Safety for the children in our schools unable to get a vaccine. Excuse me. Safety for the children and teachers and all school staff at risk for severe complications from this illness. The Delta variant is 3 times more transmissible than the former Alpha variant, which means masks are more important now than ever. Too many times in my practice, I've witnessed the negative effects virtual school and isolation have had on mental and physical health of my patients. Students need school for their development. They can't get this critical development time back. Thank you for keeping masks in our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Katie Gash will be followed by Barbara Blaine. Welcome, Ms. Gash.
Hello. Dear Chairman, school board members, superintendent, and district leaders. I was at a first responders breakfast a few weeks ago with my husband, and I believe it was one of the chiefs who commented on how incredibly hard it has been to maintain the morale of the men and women they lead in the face of blatant ingratitude and selfishness from many who do not understand or care to understand the depth of the duty they carry out so faithfully, day in and day out. It's getting harder and harder to attract people into this profession, he said, because it is such a demanding and thankless job. They feel overwhelmed and unsupported. And as I listened to the chief, I couldn't help but see myself and my fellow teachers. This can be a thankless job sometimes, but Dr. Bryant, though pockets of detractors try to discourage us and pull us down, you and this board have always rallied around us. Thank you, and it is my prayer that you will continue to do so, even in the sea of disinformation, unfounded ridicule, and anger. I thank you.
Next is Barbara Blaine, followed by Kelly Wiggin. Welcome, Ms. Blaine.
Thank you, Mr. Craven. The January 5th, 2021 Times News article about the passing of Tom Orr reflected the touching words of Hendersonville High Principal Bobby Wilkins, who stated, "It was a sad day when I heard we had lost him. He was a wonderful teacher who touched so many lives. As I told a couple of teachers yesterday, it is an end of an era for HHS. We have lost a great Bearcat. It is my sincere hope that present and future generations of the Bearcat community and Henderson County will be provided a lasting opportunity to remember Tom Orr and to know that his passing was indeed an end of an era for HHS in this community. Thank you for your consideration in naming the auditorium of Hendersonville High School the Thomas E. Orr Auditorium." And I have passed a copy of my original 3-minute remarks to Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Blaine.
you.
Kelly Wiggin, followed by Madison May.
I'm going to adjust to the time best I can. On Friday, I actually spoke with the state-level Board of Education and was told that, in fact, the North Carolina toolkit is not legally binding at all. She told me specifically that there are no legal ramifications if a local school board ignores it completely. That was confirmed this morning by Union County School Board when they took a stand against the bully tactics coming from Mandy Cohen and Roy Cooper, and they based their decisions on real science. And as of late July, there were already 47 scientific studies that did confirm the ineffectiveness of masks and 32 additional scientific studies confirming the negative health effects on the children wearing masks. So we're going to ask you to take a stand up to the bully tactics, and let our kids breathe. Science proves they need oxygen. I'm also going to correct a couple of things I've already heard that everybody likes to call, we'll just go with misinformation. I want to remind everybody, Mission Hospital was just caught lying about their COVID numbers in the media. It was confirmed. So stop trying to scare us. Those schools closing, by the way, they were closed due to overzealous quarantines, not actual sickness at all. Rosa Parks said no, don't be bullied.
All right, next up, Madison May, and you get 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to come speak today at this school meeting. I will start off by saying that before school even started, I was hesitant about coming back because I didn't have the option to not wear a mask. It gives me headaches and makes my anxiety super bad. A week before school started, I was sending y'all various emails talking about my hesitation and needing help to make my decision, and I only got a few responses back. On the second day of school, my worst fear was that I talked about in those emails came true after I was removed from class and sent to the office after I was told I didn't have my mask on the correct way. My anxiety was already where it was with the mask on, but after I was called out in class in front of all of my peers and classmates, my anxiety was 10 times worse, and I couldn't get a deep breath because I wasn't allowed to pull my mask down. I walked up the stairs and dropped all my books and binders, and when I called my mom on the way to the office, she couldn't hear what I was saying because I was shaking so badly. I am an honor roll student, an honors student, and a student athlete that represents the school. Last time I checked, I come to school to get my education and not be hounded about how to wear my mask correctly. I am already doing my job by showing up to school with my mask on, even though I don't agree with it. But I walk around the hallways at school getting told to have my mask on the right way because I pull it down for 2 seconds to breathe. We're also being told that I have to participate in gym class with the masks on and not be able to pull them down for 2 seconds while we're in the middle of a game of dodgeball. Even if I walk away from everybody, I'm still not allowed to pull it down. There are so many different double standards in our school with the masks on, like you can drink out of the water fountains, but we're stuck wearing masks and not being able to pull them down just for a second. When we ate in the cafeteria, we were elbow to elbow, packed in like sardines without masks on, but the solution is to put us elbow to elbow the same way out in the parking lot, and somehow that is so much better just because we are sitting outside. I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way at all, but the things that are being done and the rules that we have with these masks on are stupid with all the double standards there are. When it comes to kids getting COVID and others being contact traced, that's a whole other subject because we're still wearing the masks and end up getting quarantined and missing out on so much class because we don't have our teachers in front of us to help. School is very important to me and I work very hard in class, but if I end up being contact traced or getting COVID, even if I wear my mask the right way, I will fall behind, my grades will start to slip because all my classmates will be so far ahead of me. I very much appreciate being allowed to speak today, and I hope my words speak loudly to you, knowing the struggles that are already being put in front of me and other students just because of a face covering. And thank you, Madison Cawthorn, for being here and supporting our county today.
Thank you, Ms. May. Next up is Karen Lynch Thompson, followed by Aaron Purcell. Welcome, Ms. Thompson.
I graduated a Bearcat in 1974. T.E. Orr served me well. I will use words he introduced me to. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. It was in his classroom all 4 years I attended. Those words have served me well. They are a part of me. I will say, again, words he taught me. Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen farther, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants." Please forgive my emotion, but I carry with me the wishes of many. Please name the auditorium after the greatest teacher I've ever known.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Tom Orr.
Aaron Purcell, followed by Savannah Caldwell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wanted to first read you a Bible verse, Proverbs 6:16-19. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. I want to speak directly about the division that this state and county are creating in our public school system. SEL, the social and emotional learning curriculum that you speak of, not only drives a nail between our students on the topics of race and gender, but to recognize that they are to look down on themselves for being who they are as an individual. The school's curriculum should only include reading, writing, math, history, science. Anything other is a division. As a United States Army veteran in deployment of Afghanistan, fighting IEDs the easy way or the hard way, taking enemy fire as a soldier, we did not care about our buddy's skin color. We saw each other as a family. Do not allow SEL, CRT to get into our schools.
Thank you. Miss Savannah Caldwell, student at Rugby Middle. Welcome. You will get the full 3 minutes, ma'am.
My name is Savannah Kawal. I am a 7th grader at Rugby Middle School. Ever since the first day of school, I've been getting headaches every day because I had to wear a stupid mask. It's been really hard for me to breathe in them. if I take off my mask, my headaches go away. I ended up going to the nurse's office on the first day of school because it got so bad. I'm sad because I'm missing the school. I'm missing the education that I need. Let me get to the point. No one wants to wear a mask. I want to see my teachers when they talk to me. God created a smile on our face. He doesn't want to see them covered up. COVID-19 has a 99.9 survival rate for kids. I have a better chance dying of choking on my food in the cafeteria than getting COVID. Then on top, I'm healthy and not sick. You don't want to send me home on quarantine. It doesn't really make any sense at all. If I ask, please reconsider the mask mandate. Ever since March, we got pulled out of school for 2 weeks. And I was like, 2 weeks, yay, we got out of school. But then when I went virtual, it was really hard for me. My sister's in kindergarten, and then she went virtual for Fernleaf, and she sat on the floor because she was so devastated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mike Kaywell. Followed by Indiana Jackson.
All right, I'll make it quick, guys. I brought a meter up here to show you the CO or the O2 levels in here, and I can't even get this thing to be below OSHA standards just standing here right now. It'll go off here in a second. It's 2,000 in here, so your ventilation isn't very good in here. But I can tell you, I put this thing in my daughter's mask, and it hits 10,000. So that's why she was just up here. That's her. I mean, just you guys are overlooking some of the health issues that are. See, there you go. You're overlooking some of the other health issues, and it's all tunnel vision, COVID only. All other things don't matter, you know. Headaches don't matter. Emotional. You're talking about emotional things here, and this stuff that you want to implement for the school to help these guys, and these guys are struggling right now. And you keep putting these masks on and making everybody feel like they're sick and they shouldn't be next to each other. It's just ridiculous. I mean, you put all the faith in CDC and that they're the golden rule, and you don't listen to anybody else or anybody else's opinions. I think you guys need to look a little bit farther into this. You just need to let them breathe. Let them be kids. They can survive it. It's been proven.
Thank you for your time.
Let their immune systems do what they do.
Indiana Jackson, followed by Courtney McCall. Welcome, Ms. Jackson.
Hey, everybody. All right, so, God, you know, it's just so, like, God is so divided in here. I don't even know what I can even speak about. I mean, I do know, like, of course, diversity and inclusion and critical race theory. But, you know, I'm so thrown off because, God, everybody is just so divided. Like, I'm just saying, I've never felt such division in one room before in my life, and that's just crazy. But you know, I hope y'all can come to some decision about the mask and everything, because my kids are fine either way. They really don't care about the division and everything. But I want to jump on that. The mental health program that you're all bringing, please consider diversity in your in the program, in the team that comes up with the program, because one of the first slides that you had was a white lady holding up a black puppet, and I'm like, what the, like, really? Like, y'all have to consider things like that you show, like, even right there. But again, just unity. I hope we can all get to some type of unity with this, because it's really divided in here. You guys are divided. But racial and diversity inclusion, please contact me. I asked you guys to do that last time, didn't, but we still got time.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Next up is Courtney McCall, followed by Beverly Henderson. Welcome, Ms. McCall.
First, let's admit that these masks are about quarantine times and not about the health of our children. If it were, we would not be forcing students to wear something that's chewed on, colored on, played with at recess, or dragged on the floor, all of which I've seen in my classroom as well as others. If you genuinely think these masks are healthy for our kids, you obviously have not been in an elementary school lately. I could spend the majority of my day reminding students to keep their mask above their nose or threatening them with different punishments. I choose, however, to teach. The threats can be left to the middle school staff. which brings me to my experience as a mother. My son, who's been brave enough to stand up and speak before the board in the past, is an honor roll student with no behavior issues, but he has to hear every single day that he could be sent to refocus, ISS, or do burpees until he pukes if he isn't wearing his mask correctly. He hears lectures every single day about how if his mask isn't worn correctly, he must not care about other people or his teachers, that if he gets COVID, he's screwed. Maybe it's the elementary teacher in me, but I don't find it appropriate to speak to students this way, especially at 11 years old. Perhaps if his teachers are genuinely that terrified, they should find a different profession. COVID's real, it's here to stay. We've learned to live with it. It's time for our schools to catch up.
Thank you, Ms. McCall. Beverly Henderson, followed by William Lance. Welcome, Ms. Henderson.
First and foremost, I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I live in a country where I have freedom to express my opinion. I want to thank Henderson County Public Schools for allowing me to share my thoughts. I'm not so foolish to believe that anything that I say today will persuade anyone to change their opinion regarding masks or vaccine mandates. However, I feel that it's my job as a mother and as a resident of Henderson County and an American citizen to stand for what I believe is true. I stood in this position 12 years ago fighting for my eldest son, and now I stand here fighting for my youngest son. I refuse to let my sons think that what is happening in our county and in our country is normal. I will teach them to take a stand for what is right. I want them to know what their limits are, know when to give, know when to demand, know when to say no, and more importantly, when enough is enough. I love my family, my community, and my country just as you. Standing for what I believe does not make me ignorant or selfish. It simply makes me an American. We all have a right to choose.
Thank you. William Lance, followed by Sheridan Shepard. William Lance, Old Clear Creek Road. Going once, going twice. Sold. Ms. Shepard, you're next. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Sheridan Shepard Phillips, and I'm here on behalf of my mother and my father, Pat and John Shepard, who could not be here this afternoon. This is from my mom. He gave countless, but I feel the same way. Mr. Orr gave countless hours to perfect each play he directed at HHS. After teaching English all day, no one could count the extra hours he gave freely after school and into the evening for many, many years. Every student was so important to him. Whether they had the lead role or were an ensemble cast member, he made sure everyone knew they were critical to the success of the show. He loved the theater and could make magic happen in that auditorium. Besides the great plays he produced, he was a great historian here. His weekly newspaper columns recorded so much of our heritage. They will soon be published in a book for all of us to remember. Additionally, he wrote and produced many historical plays here in Hendersonville, featuring many volunteers of our community. In addition to this, he was active in the Historical Society and instrumental in the Henderson County Historical Museum. He was the chairman of the steering committee for the Henderson County Walk of Fame. He was also elected to the Henderson County School Board and was chairman. Please name the auditorium after Mr. Orr. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shepard. Next, Mark Shepard, followed by Jay Carey. Mark Shepard? Mr. Shepard? Okay, perfect.
So I appreciate your time today, and I know with some grave decisions y'all have to make, it might seem talking about Tom Orr insignificant. But Tom Orr was a man in his senior years that taught us all a lesson. That lesson was to love this community, to love each other, and he wrote about it every week in our paper. If you never paid attention to that, you would have been right here with us. You sat where y'all did, okay? So talking about Tom Orr today in this day and age is very important. Because naming that auditorium after him would show our students and the people of this community of his legacy. And that legacy is to love this community. He loved Henderson County and everything about it more than anyone else. And that was his great lesson to us all. So that's really where this comes into place. It's not that he was a great teacher and all the other great things he did, but he was someone that truly taught us that lesson, to love this community more than anyone else. Thank y'all very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Jay Carey, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Jay Carey. I am a Democratic congressional candidate for District 11, and more importantly, I am a father of 4 boys, 2 of which attend school here. 1 is too old for school now, and 1 is 2 years old. First off, I wanted to thank you for continuing to improve your initiative of the mental health initiatives. I have, as a father of a 16-year-old with mental health challenges, I really appreciate what you've been able to do for him and continue to do for him. Secondly, I want to thank you for the hard work, the hard decisions. I want to thank those members that voted to support and to initiate the mask mandate and continue to support it. I understand that you have been subject of death threats, violence against your families, and other unimaginable, ridiculous things. I urge you to continue to follow the science, continue to use the common sense that God gave us, supporting this mask mandate until we can get through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Next up is Nori Sanchez, followed by Beth Campbell. Welcome, Ms. Sanchez.
My name is Nori Sanchez. I'm a grandmother of 2 kids in the Henderson County schools. We moved to Hendersonville so that we could be closer to them and be involved in their schools and in their education. I wanted to thank you for the difficult decisions that you are facing. I appreciate personally the fact that you put in place the mask mandate. I don't want my kids to die. But I would hope that you would continue them if people don't want to wear masks and they don't want their children to wear masks. Then we need to increase the vaccination rate in the county, and we need to pay attention to the distancing requirements that we have and to continue to wear our masks for a little while longer, and then our kids should be able to go back into school with no masks. But thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Beth Campbell, followed by Kathy Arista. Beth Campbell. Welcome, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of my 3 kids because the last thing that they should have to worry about is fighting for their very rights. They're busy doing their homework, which is what they're supposed to do. I have to fight for them because we voted for you guys to do that for them, and you're not. You are listening to, you're getting numbers left and right. I can throw stats at you. I can throw numbers at you all day long. It won't matter because at the end of the day, we all recognize that you're following your overlords at the health department and doing whatever they tell you to do. And it's obvious. We see you, Mr. Bridges. We all saw you on Facebook, standing there with your arm around that little girl, with your mask down below your nose. You know what our kids get with their mask below their nose? Threatened by their teachers. For ISS. Going home, quarantining. Enough is enough. It has to stop. A little while longer. How long is a little while longer? We're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Kathy Arista, followed by Ashley Orsulf. Welcome.
Thank you. I would just like to say that before the Apple Festival, an article came out in the Lightning, and it had an article about the Apple Festival board and that they had decided on their own to keep mandates from happening for the festival. In their conversation with the Department of Health, Steve Smith, Dr. Brian, I'm chatting with you as well on this. I can quote you what Steve Smith said in their conversation because he heard that they weren't going to hold any mandates. He suggested that there would be some common sense types of things that people should do. He strongly encouraged festival goers to wear masks. He also recommended, and in the end he said, I think people just have to make their own decisions about the level of risk tolerance. This is the Health Department director saying this to the bigger Hendersonville community. Why can't he say that and let the kids have their option of whether they want to wear a mask or not?
Thank you, Mr. Easter. Next up is Ashley or herself. Just hold on one second. Followed by David Knock. You may begin, please.
I'm Ashley Orself. I'm here in supporting the naming of the Hendersonville High School Auditorium after Thomas E. Orr. A quote from Sarah J. I would not be who I am if it weren't for Mr. Orr's productions and their influence on my life. Leanne B. I can't imagine the auditorium being named after anyone else. Tom Orr was an icon among educators. Jeremy L. In high school, Mr. Orr encouraged me to enter a national writing contest and I won first prize. Mr. Orr was an advocate for our school and an inspiring teacher. These are just a few quotes of the 100 letters I received from Mr. Orr's students, sharing the impact he had on their education at Hendersonville High School and throughout their adult lives. Close to 600 students and community members have signed a petition to name this auditorium after Mr. Orr, and each of you have a copy of that petition. Countless voices of the high school alumni and community are the voices that support this effort. I ask you to listen to the majority, the 100s of people that want Tom Orr's legacy to continue.
Thank you, Ms. Self.
Yep, thank you.
Next up, Mr. David Knock. Saw him here earlier. Is he outside? Mr. Knock? All right, moving on. Carrie O'Kane, followed by Christopher Reed. Welcome, Mr. O'Kane.
Thank you, board. Tom was an awesome friend to me, Tom Orr. He used his auditorium as his classroom like no other teacher. He passionately used the auditorium as his palette and his canvas to train people and educate them and prepare them for the future. I'd just like for you to recognize his talents and his many contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Christopher Reed, followed by James Leone. Mr. Reed, welcome.
Thank you all. My name is Chris Reed, and I am one of your neighbors. I am a father of two beautiful children, one of whom suffers from respiratory illnesses. I am the son of a mother, another neighbor, who is fighting every day to survive ovarian cancer. I am a North Henderson graduate, and I had the honor of being one of Doc Case's students some 20 years ago. I have had the opportunity to watch and listen to the board meetings over the last several months, and above all else, regardless of how you voted, I want to thank you for your service to our community. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to hear a lot of great information about COVID numbers in the community today. I ask that you again listen to the people you entrust to provide you with accurate, peer-supported information and continue to require masks in school. I want to get back to normal so bad, just like everybody else here. Nobody wants these masks, but we're just not there yet. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. James Leone, L-Y-O-N. Is it Lion or did I say Lion? Sorry. I wanted to sound fancy.
I'll roll with it.
Leone.
Good afternoon. My name is James Lyon. I am a small business owner. I have served the community for the last 5.5, 6 years here. And like many of the small businesses, I had to sail through and find a way through the pandemic last year to stay solvent and to maintain a presence beneficial to the community. I saw how the pandemic devastated our small business community. I saw how it decimated our tax base. I saw even now into this year how we are still trying to recoup and recover. The children in our schools are as much a supporting member of the community as the adults are in that community. I ask that we, for the sake of our economic health as well as personal, that we maintain this supporting mask mandate just for a little while longer to keep our businesses healthy and strong. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think it's Anthony Catania, C-A-T-A-N-I-A. Anthony? Catania. Thank you. Followed by John Kuhlman.
That was 3 minutes, but I think we'll just make it short. I think everyone here has spoken my mind, and I'm for optional choice. I feel that if you are at risk, wear a mask. If you believe they work, more power to you. We're only human beings. We have facts on all sides of the issue, and we could argue about that all day long. Ultimately, I have 2 girls at Marlowe. I love them dearly. They're my life. I want to see their faces, and I'd just like to read my conclusion. Please vote no to mandatory masking and vote yes to optional. As your civic duty, don't be hostage to mob rule of the political winds. The care and education of our children is our most important responsibility. Do not support a mandate which, while taking away our liberty, will cause harm to our children for years to come in ways we cannot even imagine. Life presents us with risks every day. As adults, we must teach our children about the balance between freedom and risk. COVID is here to stay. Masks must not be. Thank you, board members.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman, followed by Mary Beth Johnson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I'd like for you to imagine a football coach. This coach tells his players they don't need to wear helmets. He tells them that God gave them a skull to protect their heads, and that's all they need. Besides, their friends in the stands wouldn't be able to see their smiles. How long would it take before you fired that coach? The same is true about having to wear a mask. In a time of global pandemic, this board would be committing the same gross negligence as that imagined coach. No rational person believes otherwise. And now that the FDA has fully approved the Pfizer vaccine, I would urge this board to mandate all school employees be vaccinated to protect the children in your care. To do anything less would open up this district to lawsuits over gross negligence. Thank you for your time.
You've done so well. We've got 5 more. Please let whoever's speaking speak, okay? We've gotten through about 50 of these, so 5 more. Let's go. Mary Beth Johnson.
To whom it may concern, it is under duress that I submit this letter of resignation. Over the past 18 months, policy changes and board mandates have infringed upon my rights and impeded my ability to follow my moral obligation. Decisions made at this board level and adopted by HCPS administrative offices have made it impossible for me to feel good and comfortable working for the school system any longer. The reckless way that this school system has held my job for ransom by attempting to take my basic liberties is unacceptable, unforgivable, and downright unconstitutional. I will no longer comply with the stipulations placed upon my liberties, as I feel that they create a hostile learning environment for students and cause a deep moral conflict within myself. Your policies have a comply or else tone that goes against every principle set forth that I hold in high esteem, granted to me at birth by God and the Constitution of the United States of America. It is the sole fault of these abusive policies that I will leave a job I love and that I am very good at doing.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Heather Heffner, please. followed by Ron Boyd.
Hi, my name is Heather Heffner, and I have 2 children in the Henderson County school system. My son is in elementary school. He's on the spectrum. He came home the other day, and I could just tell he was unhappy. And I said, buddy, what's going on? He goes, I'm just tired. I'm just tired of the world today. He's 9, okay? Think of how hard this is for all of us. He's 9, and I could just tell he was just overwhelmed. And I said, well, buddy, because we've been limiting how much TV he watches and stuff. We don't want him subjected to all that. And he said, we have all these rules. You have to sit in the same spot. You have to sit here. You have to do this. And I know it's for their own good, you know, but for him, it's like being in a jail. It's like you have to do this, this, and this. And it's just, I mean, school enough is hard enough for little kids, especially somebody who has ADHD and is on the spectrum, for him to have to do this. I had COVID back in December. I gave it to my husband. He gave it to one of our children. The other child got it. We've all had it. I was wearing a mask all the way through. I was all about it. Oh, yes, I'm going to do my part. And then I stopped wearing it. We have been the healthiest family since then, okay?
Thank you, Ms. Heffner.
You're welcome.
And for the man that has 2 on it,
Mr. Boyd?
Good afternoon, Board, and Mr. Craven. I got a question before I begin my 1 minute. Could they stop the clock for a second, please? I want to speak on both issues. Could I get 1 minute on both? Or
Sir, you get 1 minute to speak to the board, please.
1 minute, okay. I want to speak on Mr. Orr. Mr. Orr was my senior class teacher, and I was a senior play in class of 1975. South Pacific was the play that we did. And Mr. Orr was one of my favorite teachers of all. I was able to teach at Hendersonville High School for 3 years. I came back there. I played football, played sports there. But Mr. Orr made a great impact on my life. We lost some great teachers at Hendersonville High School, like Coach Hunt, Coach Brittenall, Coach Lauder. A lot of coaches have passed on. But Mr. Orr was one of my favorite teachers. It didn't matter what color you were, he loved people. As a black man, he loved me. He treated me just the same as everybody else. Him and Miss Hannah Edwards she went to my church, and her and Mr. Orr was best friends. So I think it should be a no-brainer. The auditorium should be named after Mr. Orr without any further discussion. That's my thing. Thank you.
Next is Janice Parker.
I'm Janice Parker. I have grandchildren of school age. I'm here to speak to the board about your duty to immediately act to restore the rights and liberties of students and their families. All of you took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and the state constitution. Neither of these documents allow you to violate the rights of the people on the basis of a health emergency. Last meeting, Steve Smith said, oh, we could talk about this all day long, back and forth, and I have something to illustrate that. It's an Aesop fable. The wolf came upon a stray lamb bathing in a stream. The wolf was hungry, but the lamb looked so pitiful there that the wolf thought he needed to justify his action. You there, you must be punished for muddying the stream that I was drinking. But, sir, said the lamb, how could I muddy your water while I'm downstream from you? You did muddy it anyway, said the wolf. And besides, you spread rumors about me last year. How could I, said the lamb. I was just born this year. Well, it was your brother. I don't have brothers. The tyrant will always find an excuse for tyranny.
Thank you, Ms.
The unjust will not listen to the reasoning of the innocent.
Thank you. Our final speaker tonight is going to be Congressman Madison Cawthorn. Mr. Bryant, would you push that right there? Mr. Cawthorn, if you wouldn't mind, you can go to this one right here if you like.
Fantastic.
I think that one will be on for you.
Members of the board, thank you very much for serving our community. Tyrants thrive when freedom is sacrificed on the altar of safety. Unbridled executives yearn for a fearful populace because power is found in fear. I believe that King George III would be immensely proud of Governor Roy Cooper. He's running the state with an iron fist, liberty be damned. He has ripped away your power and your will. No executive should undermine the foundations of our local government, you all. This school board did the right thing by voting to stop Roy Cooper's mask mandates. But our tyrant governor decided he was going to trample on this board's decision, flex his political muscle, and run roughshod over the will of our local government, all of you sitting here. We are here to tell him no more. You are not the king. We are not your subjects. We, the people, will not bow to you. We will not accept your edicts. North Carolinians have had enough. I give you my word, I will work tirelessly to help elect patriots across this state who will put this self-appointed king back in his place. Once we put the governor in his place, it will finally be up to you to do the right thing for our students. Stop using my constituents' children as political pawns. Educate them. Don't indoctrinate them. Stop forcing people to co-parent with the government. I urge you, do the right thing, regardless of the backlash.
Thank you, Mr. Cawthorn. That concludes the public comment portion of our agenda today. We'll wait for those that want to leave to leave.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're about to get started, so if I can get some quiet, please. We need to finish our work. Next up is going to be our consent agenda. We are going to be removing item E, the budget amendment, because it's still in the interim budget. And I'm also going to be pulling out the resolution for Suicide and Prevention and Awareness Month, and I'd love if somebody would decide to read that. Any other questions on what I just said about consent agenda from the board? All right, we'll go ahead and make a motion on that while removing item E, the budget amendment. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? All those in favor? Well, Mr. Bridges, yes or no? Yes. Ms. Case, Mr. Egoff, yes, sir. Ms. Caskey, Dr. Revis, Amy Lynn Holt, you still there?
Yes, and yes.
She's a yes, and I'm a yes. It passes. All right, who would like to read the resolution, please? Anybody? All right, Ms. Caskey, you win.
I got it. I just can't.
Matt, can you put, you can't hear her?
I have my microphone on.
Who can't you hear? Dr. Revis? You're fine.
Can you hear me?
You can't hear Ms. Caskey. Her green light is on.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. Resolution honoring the observance of Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, September 2021. Whereas September is nationally recognized as National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month and is intended to affirm the need for suicide prevention awareness to increase the community's awareness about suicide's warning signs, to reduce the stigma associated with suicide, and to advocate for the ability of mental health services to all. And whereas suicide is a complex but preventable health issue that requires compassion, empathy, trust, understanding, and access to professional services. And whereas suicide rates increased 33% between 1999 and 2019, and suicide was responsible for more than 47,500 deaths in 2019, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. And whereas the CDC reported suicide as the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 34 in 2019. And whereas suicide prevention is especially vital for youth, with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, reporting that 16.5% of American youth aged 6 to 17 experienced a mental health disorder in 2016, and 18.8% of high school students and 11.8% of young adults aged 18 to 25 reported serious thoughts of suicide. And whereas young people who identify as LGBTQ+ are almost 5 times as likely to have attempted suicide as compared to their heterosexual counterparts, according to the Trevor Project, and whereas suicide and its associated mental health conditions are family and community challenges, with NAMI reporting that at least 8.4 million Americans provide care to an adult with a mental or emotional health issue, high school students with significant symptoms of depression are more than twice as likely to drop out of school compared to their peers. Mental illness and substance use disorders are involved in 1 out of every 8 emergency department visits, and more than 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system have a diagnosed mental illness. And whereas Henderson County Public Schools, its many partners, and our community are committed to caring for students and families by sharing resources and advocating for each other, now therefore be it resolved by Henderson County Board of Public Education that the month of September be observed as Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, adopted this 13th day of September 2021.
Thank you very much, Ms. Caskey.
Welcome, but I think I cleared the room.
Yeah, we apparently nobody wanted to hear the mask issue. They just wanted to talk about it. So next up is old business. Okay, so when we did this last month, we took these all as one big fell swoop. What I'd like to ask all the board members now, do you have any questions on second reading on all of this, on any of these policies? Mrs. Holt, if you're still there, this includes you as well.
What did you say, Ms. Holt, if you're still there, what?
This applies to you as well. Do you have any questions on any of the old business policies 1 through 22?
I do not.
Right. If there are none, we'll go ahead and someone make a motion, please. You can just read from the first policy that's there.
Mr. Chairman, you can take it as a single motion to approve old business policies 1 through 22.
So moved. So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Bridges, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Case? Yes. Mr. Egoff?
Yes.
Ms. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis? Yes. And Ms. Holt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, 7-0. Boom, done. Okay.
Love it.
Moving on to first order of new business, and this is the current face covering guidance and policy by Dr. John Bryant. And I want to preface this by saying, based on actions of a Senate bill that was just recently passed about a week and a half ago, we are now required to, by law, to vote on our mask issue every single month. So this will be a new bullet point on our meeting every single month. So Dr. Bryant, you take it away and we'll go from here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Craven and members of the board. And if it pleases the board, I'd love to go straight to the superintendent's reports and return to learn so that I could.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get return to learn, and then that'd be perfect.
And that way, we would have a reference point for the decision that's been made. And as Mr. Craven said, and I'll touch on this in the presentation, that right now the passage of Senate Bill 654 requires that boards of education vote on their current position with regard to face covering requirements in their school system at least once a month. So I'll speak to that in the Return to Learn presentation as that's being put up on the screen for the board. And then I'll work through those data points, and then, Mr. Craven, we can return to the new business and give consideration to that particular piece. So just one moment as we get ready for that. I've got the clicker. Oh, yes, sir. Let me run through it. You're just making sure I'm ready.
Is the air on hot?
This is your moment to take a break. That's right.
Matthew, is the air on back there? Okay.
Thank you very much. And so we'll work through Return to Learn. Again, some familiar slides, some familiar information, and then to give you the most updated information that we have available to us at this time. Beginning again with our Harvard Global Health Institute data, which talks about daily cases per 100,000. Again, a 7-day rolling average is the data set that we look at here. We've been tracking this again since April as we followed through the spring and then summer season, and then when we began to return to school. Again, you see case rates related to Henderson County during this period of time. As of today, that number is 46.2, and that last data that it's reporting at that time is September the 12th, so it's Sunday. Normally, all these other days are Monday dates. That most recent Monday date is not there. And again, this is something to be optimistic about. There's some positive in this particular graph that we saw the slope of that line increasing significantly, and we seem to have plateaued those data sets a bit most recently in the last several weeks. I'd love to give you this particular graphic as some perspective as it relates to looking at the data across North Carolina during this period of time. And again, this is the 7-day rolling average. You can see from November through January 2021, and then what was taking place in July. This is as of August the 29th. When you look at this slide, this is as of September the 9th. And again, there's some optimism here that while we have seen peaks and valleys in this data, you also note that there appears to be a crest to the data associated with what we've seen recently. So again, always looking at the trend data and what that informs about our decisions moving forward. The county alert system was transitioned to the CDC's Prevention for Community Transmission. You're familiar again with this map. This map essentially illustrates where transmission areas are. So you're looking at community transmission rates specific, whether it's low, moderate, substantial, or high. At this particular time, which is a window between July 31st and August the 6th, you see what the state of North Carolina looked like, and you can even somewhat see what's taking place in the southeast. This is what the graphic looks like as of the period of time, which is September 2nd to September 8th. So again, the entire state of North Carolina is considered to be high transmission. High transmission, again, is a 7-day rolling average of 25.0 or higher related to that. In terms of our district dashboard, we have been communicating throughout this process school-affected cases. And so when the public references what is taking place in individual school communities so they can make decisions related to that, you can reference our dashboard for positivity and positive case rates there, again, as well as tracking cumulative case rates. And folks in our community are familiar with this. When we look at the graphic here, a graphic you've seen many, many times as it relates to what you can expect in terms of our transparency and our effort to report. We have a whole series of things that we will do, and we will have things that we will not do. I want to speak admittedly at this time as we have a number of people in our community that have asked us to stop making these phone calls. In fact, we make phone calls every day at nearly every school site when it relates to positive cases. I remember the board charging us with one time, we want people to complain that we're over-communicating. Well,
I will say, my wife said this weekend, she's like, I got an email, a text message, a phone call. I was like, well.
That's exactly right.
I want to let you know.
That's exactly right. We have worked through that. We do recognize, though, again, what we don't want is our communications to become white noise, right?
Sure.
Our goal is to share with people what's taking place in their individual schools. Because of the rate of transmission that we have in our community right now, we are seeing those calls be very, very frequent. And again, this board is familiar that when we have a cluster identification, that's not a school-affected call. That's a call from myself to the entire school district. And of course, we've had 3 cluster notifications. Those are linked cases. So when you have 5 COVID positive cases that are linked within a school community, that's a cluster. And so again, we've been communicating regularly through the duration of this period. As it relates to our current operations and our operational capacity, the board is well familiar that we started our traditional calendars on the 23rd, and so all 22 school sites, which include 23 schools, are under current operation right now. And per this board's decision, effective on Wednesday, September the 1st, all Henderson County Public School students, staff, and visitors are required to wear face coverings in all indoor settings, including extracurricular activities in school grounds. Again, this guidance is meant to apply to all HCPS locations and properties when indoors, except with legal exceptions that apply. Now, why this is, I think for a little bit of context, there's much reference to what's taking place across the state right now. What you can see is that this is a data set that's been compiled by the North Carolina School Boards Association with regard to local school system policies as of September the 10th of 2021. Currently, there are 3 school systems that have a mask optional requirement, and then the remaining 116 have a requirement associated with them. Yes, sir, Mr. Eagle.
Do you have any information on quarantines for those counties?
We've not been tracking quarantines in other counties. I know there's been much shared about what has informed the decisions that have been different for those, but we've been paying closer attention to our own. So I'm sorry, we don't have.
No, I understand.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So that's what you see here. As was referenced at the beginning of new business, this is critically important for the board because, again, Senate Bill 654 was signed into legislation, and there was some very specific language with regard to what expectations are now had with regard to board's operations. And so, again, local school districts are required to adopt a policy, ultimately making a decision, which this board has done, with regard to face coverings for employees and students for the entirety of the school year. And at this time, the governing body must vote at least once a month, likely to be part of our regularly scheduled meeting, about whether or not the face covering policy should be modified. Again, that's why agenda item A under new business exists. We are required to have an opportunity to make a decision associated with that. The Strong Schools NC Toolkit, again, this board very familiar. Its last update was August the 26th, but there were some effective elements to that. It was updated on the 9th and then became effective in on July 30th at 5 p.m. And most notably, as we've shared before, the toolkit became organized in a different fashion. Last school year, the operational guidance here had a whole series of requirements in order to be open for any kind of face-to-face learning. At this point, that language revolves around shoulds and coulds. We talked about this in our last two board meetings. It's been updated to intend to give boards greater flexibility as conditions evolve, and then to maintain plans for different scenarios with regard to the appropriate restrictions on site. The toolkit does state that the should strategies are recommended, and if they are not utilized or not implemented, they create conditions of high risk for exposure and spread. Specifically within the toolkit, there are a series of recommendations that Hcps is currently not adhering to. We've spoken of these in previous meetings, and again, want to revisit that with the board at this time. Right now, what are we not doing that is a should statement in the toolkit? Number one, we are not requiring teachers and staff to report vaccination status. They are not required to do so in any operational capacity. Second, we are not requiring teachers and staff who are unvaccinated or do not disclose vaccination status to participate in testing or screening programs. While there's been much dialogue about that, and we continue to learn more about the options that would be available, we certainly were one of the school systems that opted into the interest to learn more about diagnostic and screening programs in our system. We currently have not implemented one, and then therefore, bullet 3, we have not incorporated a screening or a testing strategy consistent with those recommendations, including requirements for screening and testing for unvaccinated teachers and staff. When we look beyond that, I'm going to go back to, sorry, that was the right slide. One of the elements that has received a considerable amount of discussion is with relate to the quarantining guidance and how the quarantining operates. There are specific definitions for how quarantining is determined for individuals that are determined to be close contact. Again, within 6 feet for at least 15 minutes within a cumulative 24-hour period for someone who has tested positive. There are 3 exceptions. The first bullet is listed here. If you are a vaccinated individual and you do not have symptoms, you do not have to quarantine. There are recommendations associated with what you should do during the meantime. The second and the third exceptions associated with this are people that have tested positive within the last 3 months and recovered and don't have symptoms. And again, the former English teacher in me emphasizes the and. Those are important. They have to all go together. And then, of course, students who are not fully vaccinated, and in other school settings, if the masks were worn appropriately and consistently by both people, the person who's tested positive for COVID and the person who's been potentially exposed. So those are the exceptions associated with that. What is true during our operations, though, is we've had both positive tests and quarantines in all conditions. I want to talk a little bit about that for a second because the board asked us to track and share this data. So when you look at Monday, August 30th through Friday, September the 3rd, you're looking at essentially the second week of school as it took place across our school system. And so the top row demonstrates the number of positive cases that are school affected. So those are staff and students who are attending the face-to-face environment in some capacity. Then what you see is the resulting quarantines associated with those. Many folks have asked, how is it that if we have a face covering expectation and bullet 3 as an exception would be that students could still have to quarantine? Well, there are circumstances by which students are within 6 feet of each other without a face covering on, most notably lunch. I'll use that as an example. When you start talking about the capacity to eat and our students and what takes place in the conditions of the classroom, We know that there are times when someone is not wearing a face covering for that duration of period, and it does exist and it does operate in that space. There are also situations where exposures have occurred in extracurricular activities. There are exposures that have occurred in classrooms. And certainly there are some specific instances that involve classrooms where that face covering requirement is, there are exceptions to that, lawful exceptions to that for students and families and otherwise, and exposures can exist in that rate. One of the things that I can speak to per Mr. Egoff's question when you look at this is, so what is the rate of expected quarantine in our school system, maybe as opposed to other school systems? And what you'll see in this data set, as well as the second week, is note in week 3 of school system operations, Monday, September the 6th through Friday, September the 10th, the positivity rate, or the positive identification, and the number of students who were resultingly quarantined is almost 1 to 1. So when we talk about best possible scenarios, when you have a student, ideally you want as few quarantines as possible. But when you look at this instance, right now our rate's about 1.34 across the board. So for every positive case that we have in our schools, you're generally looking at nearly 1.5 individuals who are quarantined as a result of that. Some other school systems who operated earlier, again, per your question, we saw quarantine rates that were 6, 7, 10 times greater than the number of positive rates that were associated with that. Why this is significant for us is because, again, the board asked us to pay attention to these numbers. These are students who are not in school. And we have to pay attention to how we're serving those students, how we're attending to provide that level of support. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. What I want to share with the board that, yes, sir, and I'll get to your question, that isn't in these numbers is there are quarantines that are the result of exposures that are not school-related. So, for example, we know when we analyze our student quarantine data, and specifically someone who's been directed to quarantine by the health department for something that isn't school-related, it's more than double the number that's related to school. We've had over 1,500 students be directed to quarantine for at least one day of school, and we've had about 600 of them related to school when you look at all 3 of those weeks. So when we talk about what also happens away from school, it's important for the board to understand someone might be under quarantine for nothing that doesn't have anything to do with a classroom exposure or an extracurricular exposure or an exposure in the hallway or an exposure at lunch. We know that all of our behaviors, 24 hours, yes, you're with us for a period of time, but all of those behaviors can result in that. And so we track that data in Power School as it relates to when a student is out and what the reason is that they're out. But I think this slide especially illustrates a real strength of what is taking place in our schools and in our school communities and the operational capacity of our students. Mr. Egoff?
Okay, so I see where you're going. The positive leads to the people that are quarantined.
That's correct.
But what I was wanting to know, and I thought we had requested, I think Amy Lynn, Ms. Holt was also, but of the people that we were quarantining, how many of them do you have that information?
Yes, sir. I don't have an exact number for you, but I can speak to your question, which is we know the clusters are perfect examples of spread within schools, right? So when we've identified a cluster and we communicate that at the 3 schools we've communicated at already, or we have instances in which somebody is test positive later after the fact, we know that sometimes a quarantine student will ultimately do that. Those rates, we're fortunate to say, are very low right now. I don't have a number to share with you, but we're continuing to evaluate how we can track that data set. Ultimately, what we're asking is, are quarantine students ultimately resulting in positives? We know that sometimes they are. Otherwise, you don't have...
Sure they are, but what... I mean, I'm sitting here, and I know we have 13,500 kids. You know, there's 181, there's 164, and your previous, I mean, and that's not out of 13,000, but I'm just so worried that some of these kids are not getting the proper education, and they're getting quarantined and sent home. Are they developing COVID? Are they, I mean, I just don't want to repeat last year.
Certainly, and I think that that's where our collective obligation is as we think about that. We know that the design of quarantine from an infectious disease policy, and again, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm just stating what I have heard, and when we work with our medical professionals, is related to the design of a quarantine is to stop during a potentially contagious transmission period. That's the design. So in a perfect world, no one tests positive that's part of that group. However, we know it occurs, and we know we have to pay attention to it. What I think we have committed to, and you see illustrated on this slide, especially based on that rate, is that the fewest number of people are being quarantined as possible. What we don't have is a slide that says 1,000, right, as a result of that. What we don't have is a slide that says we had 164 people and then multiply that number times 6 or 7 or 8. We don't have that. And so it may be that if you eat lunch with your best friend and your best friend tests positive, you possibly could end up being a quarantined individual. But we're working very deliberately to be able to avoid those situations.
That's what I wish. I mean, this auditorium was filled with people.
Yes, sir.
Both for and against. I understand that. But, you know, the people that are saying mask off, mask off, mask off, you know, I'm not a fan of these masks either. But they don't understand that because of this, we do have that number.
Those numbers are so much lower than I thought.
And they leave, and they think that we're the ones putting masks on them. I'm not putting a mask on them because I'm putting a mask on them because I don't want to see them educated at home.
Well, I think we could all speak for, even as we've said before, I think every person in our community wants to be back at a place where a face covering is not necessary. Our common ground is that space, right? Our commitment has been the stable operation of our school system, and that certainly is a challenge. Like, again, every person who's in education wants to be in education with the ability to interact with students. We all look forward to being at a space beyond this. What this demonstrates is our ability to minimize the situations that disrupt that education for every child, as each member on this board has long championed, right? When we were back here previously talking about creating a space for face-to-face learning, that was our North Star. There was a time when it was fully virtual, and where our energy was around that idea of creating a stable learning environment. And certainly this data shows us that that's giving us a great opportunity to do so. It's simply imperfect. Again, let us all be candid. No person wants to be in this space right now. We all look forward to being past this. But in our collective efforts right now, we're creating the safest environments possible that are minimizing those disruptions as well. Ms. Kasky.
Okay, I'm going to geek out a little bit. Dr. Bryant, if you could go back to the map that showed the 3 counties that had mask optional, because I can't find it on mine. I think you had a special slide that you put in. Yeah, I think when nobody was looking, you put that one in.
I'm sorry?
It's the one with Union County on
ma'am.
there. Since we've all kind of had eyes on Union.
Union,
okay,
Yancey, and Avery. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So Union County has 41,488 students, roughly 3 times what we have, right? We would agree with that. They're mask optional. They have, as of today, 7,381 students quarantined and 479 positive cases, and that positivity to quarantine rate is 15.41. Now you look at our numbers, which you just showed us, which we should be doing a happy dance as much as we
Basically
can.
1-to-1.
Exactly. We have 1/3 the students, but we have 237 students quarantined compared to 7,381. We have 147 cases compared to 479 with that 1.6 positivity rate. I mean, I know everybody wants to throw different numbers that they get from different organizations. Let's just let that go. But to me, the proof is always in the numbers. And if we have 237 kids quarantined, I think we're doing a heck of a better job than a system that has 7,300 students quarantined. So thank you.
Let me say, too, that we still have in-person learning.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Not virtual.
Exactly.
We
So
still
best
have
of
our
everything.
schools open.
Yep.
Yay.
And I think, Mr. Craven, you said this a couple weeks ago. I think I heard you say that when we were looking at, I wasn't on the board in the fall when you guys were having those 4-hour meetings about whether to open schools up, the positivity rate was lower than what it is right now.
It was about 10%, I think. 12, we were going to shut it down.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s right now, and I think the whole key is keeping them in school.
Yes.
I think it's something that you talked about previously that we do need to discuss here is how do we better support these kids that are on quarantine in our city.
I'm very concerned.
I think we can do a better job, and I want to task this admin team to do a better job. I'm not sure what that means. If that means putting a live video feed into the rooms for those for those students, or I don't know.
I don't want us to go back to where we have our teachers trying to teach face-to-face and virtually at the same time. Nobody wins in that situation. And that's very difficult for the teacher, and I don't think the face-to-face or the virtual students get what they need. But if I'm being quarantined and I'm a 612 student, particularly when I look at the 3-blocked high schools, I mean, man, when they miss a day, they're missing 2 days.
It's a lot of work. And
they're on quarantine for 10 days. They are digging themselves a hole. I know we have some support staff, but I want us to be creative and look at ways. I'm not asking for those students who are quarantined or out because of testing positive, whatever. I don't want them to be able to really interact with the teacher and ask questions, but I would love for us to be creative and find a way that the teacher's instruction could be projected via Google Classroom in some way.
Dr. Rose, could you pull the microphone down to you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am, and we appreciate that challenge. I'm proud to say that just recently we met with our Superintendent's Teachers Advisory Council, which is a group of representative teachers from all of our school environments, and that was central to our conversation.
Good.
Right? As we recognize how we can be better and strategize those areas to recognize, yes, we've hired additional staff who serve as liaisons for quarantine students. Yes, they're working to connect to be able to provide support and contact when they're working within the shell. But every opportunity for us to be better in that space is relative. And I appreciate the call out on the challenges associated with hybrid instruction in terms of what that creates. We have prioritized face-to-face instruction. But one of the things that we were doing with our teachers is saying, okay, so let's talk about these individual situations that would be able to accommodate those students when they're going to be out of school for 1 day or 2 days or 4 days or 7 days or longer. And so looking at those numbers, every one of those numbers is a student. Right? Those are young people that we have an obligation and a responsibility to. And so as we think about that, I'd love to touch on one slide regarding the communication and then continue to answer questions that you might have around that. What we do know is this, and I cannot emphasize enough the extraordinary support that we have from the health department and our school nurses. What those individuals are doing every day, the support that they are providing to our school communities, is not just direct health support and being the responsive individual, but they are the lead contact tracer and the lead communicator. And so while we're really proud of the numbers in this previous slide, if you start to divide those numbers up among 22 different locations, you'll also see the number of individual phone calls that is necessary to communicate with somebody. And so as we were brainstorming with the health department as we work through this, we are planning to implement a brief change in how we operate, and that is our Swift K-12 messaging is something everybody's familiar with, those automated calls that come. A school nurse needs the ability to get a contact tracing notification out to a significant number of people very quickly. They can respond to follow-up questions and conversations, but if they had to take 20 minutes or 30 minutes for every one of those phone calls, and they had to call 20 people, you can see where that task is starting to get beyond burdensome. So starting tomorrow, they will be utilizing our Swift K-12 notification system in order to communicate out to people the notification that they've been determined to be a close contact, with the ability for the parent or family to return the phone call back to the school nurse if they have questions or additional information associated with it. Again, we're going to try this strategy as a way of moving forward. They need some necessary support from us because to have to make those notifications, again, is exceptionally challenging based on those numbers. While we're proud of those numbers, they are significantly greater than they were in the spring. So as we work through that, we're going to be continuing our partnership regarding those notifications. Mr. Egoff?
That's great. I do have a question about how our policies, our procedures. Someone was telling me, and I don't, but they were saying that a group of people were quarantined, and they found out around 4:30 that day. Well, it was after school hours, so we did not communicate that to the students till the next day. So the next day, the children got up, got dressed, rode on the school bus, had breakfast with who knows how many, and then when school started, were immediately called to the office and quarantined. And the question was asked, why did we not quarantine them the night before they rode the bus with everybody, before they ate breakfast with everybody, and now you're quarantining more people because of this? And it was answered to me that we don't quarantine after hours.
Well, it is exactly this strategy.
Right?
Yeah, it's capacity. So
But
certainly,
at 4:30, we can't call people?
well, without knowing the details of the exact situation you're speaking to, I can't talk about that one as an example. Of
I'll be happy to give you some information when this is over.
Yeah, that'd be great. What we do know is, in order for our school nurses to operate efficiently, we want to provide them all the tools associated with doing so. So to your point, Mr. Egolf, had they had the full list and completed their contact tracing at that time, they could provide that notification to all of those individuals before we've done that. We do know that in some instances we might know who the positive is at 4:30, and we don't finish the contact tracing until early in the morning when the rest of the staff are available to talk about the seating charts, the students that they were around, where they sat with lunch, and otherwise.
She was a teacher, and she told me who was quarantined, but they didn't let her know.
Yes, sir. But again, what we want to do is operate as efficiently as possible, and so to be able to communicate that, this strategy would be in place to be able to help do that. I'm sorry, Ms. Case, did you have a question?
Somebody else that's taking hits is our principals and vice principals, because they're getting these calls like the nurses do, and sometimes they have to make the calls. So
Yes, ma'am.
SWIFT will help them out too.
Most certainly, most certainly. And I think, one of the challenges is we all admit, no one likes to be the bearer of bad news. I don't know that anybody welcomes this phone call, right? And some people are very upset when they get this phone call. And so when we talk about how we can communicate and provide that supportive information as quickly as possible, that's the goal, because those are the realities of our current operations. There is no doubt, as you look at this particular slide, that the current scale of positivity, as Dr. Revis was just asking, how different it is from the spring and our operations. To be in a number, above 40, above 45, near 50, and then 60 when we were starting, and the necessary contact tracing that is associated with that is significant. And it has affected both students and staff. Remember, there are only a couple of exceptions to individuals that would not be quarantined. If you are not vaccinated, you can be quarantined as an adult or a student. If you are in that situation where you've not previously demonstrated that you had it, or that you were not around somebody and properly wearing the face covering. And so it's important to recognize that there's a taxation associated with that on all of our employee groups. Again, we have had both students and staff test positive. That does have an impact on our workforce. As we've told you before, in our previous operations and in our current operations, we're having to track and watch that regularly on a daily basis in terms of our ability to safely supervise, monitor, and instruct students on a daily basis. If you're asking where that's affecting us in a most targeted way right now, it's our transportation department, our school bus drivers, where we already have vacancies associated with that, the support staff personnel, teacher assistants, and the support staff that push into our classrooms, and our substitute pool. We're seeing a significant downgrade in terms of the number of substitutes that are available to us to fill those spots. So when you think about somebody being out, it's not as simple as recognizing that somebody's out. Somebody has to backfill that responsibility, whether it's a school bus operation or it's classroom supervision or otherwise. So those are very real challenges associated with it. And as was mentioned to us, this idea of how we better support students who are under quarantine is critically important in both of those spaces. So when we think about those creative solutions, those most effective solutions to support and serve students, if and when they're out for a day or two or beyond that we would continue to be challenged in that space. When we talk about, yes, ma'am?
Can you tell us what those people who are dealing with the quarantine kids that we've hired, what's their jobs?
Sure. In many respects, they're serving as a liaison. So you're not talking about people that are certified in every content area. We just don't have that ability. So when you think about how you might support them, you would be reaching out to that student or that student's family, depending on the age there. You're checking to make sure that they have access to their curriculum and materials. You're helping them to get in touch with the staff that they might need to be communicating with. But really, they're a liaison for that number of students, because that number changes every day. So at any given school, you might have a dozen people that are under quarantine one day and 5 that are under quarantine the next. So what they're serving is that conduit so that you don't stay disconnected. And I think that that's why it's important what you hear Dr. Revis saying and others. How do we create access to the content in the best way that we can so that you don't necessarily feel like the lights have been turned off for you for a period of time.
Mrs. Holt has some questions.
Sure.
Ms. Holt, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, so I have a few questions. One is I would really like to see on our dashboard the amount of quarantines per week. I know that's putting in a lot of data, but I feel like for instance, this last week it was really good. It was a little over 1 quarantine per positive. And I think that if the public is seeing that it's going to go a long way towards transparency, and not only transparency, but just us letting them know. You know, they're thinking that there's 10 quarantines for every positive, and there's not.
Ms. Holt, to make sure I'm understanding.
Another thing, yes.
Just to make sure that I'm understanding your question correctly. So are you thinking about a summary total in the same way that we shared with the board?
Yes.
So at the end of the week, that there would be a category there that had maybe I'm gonna look over at Molly for a second, because there's our public information officer, that we might have a table below the positivity that just said summary number of quarantines week of September the 13th.
That would be perfect. Like if you had a you know, down below it could say positive 100 and quarantines, you know, 125.
Similar to the
On the
graphic
COVID dashboard, can you not just go ahead and put what you send to us every Friday at noon and just
track it at the bottom?
Put that on there Friday afternoon, just like you give it to us, and send it and put it on the dashboard.
If it would be acceptable to the board, that would be most accurate if we shared that on Monday morning.
But that works.
So the following week we would post that graphic that the board receives on Monday.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Holt.
The next thing is I keep hearing that nurses don't have time to see sick kids because they're so busy with contract tracing and doing other things. And I know that we have a lot of really sick kiddos that are in our school system that have disabilities that need to be seen. And I'm wondering if it is possible to hire an additional 22 individuals at, you know, one for each school to help with some of that, so nurses can get back to, you know, checking on kids with diabetes, checking, you know, insulin levels, doing catheterization. I know that they're doing a whole lot of stuff, and I'm just wondering if we can bring somebody in to kind of partner with them to help with that.
In order that the board would be able to discuss that particular item, so are you proposing additional employees of the school system to do administrative work, or additional employees of the health department?
Well, I think it could be for, you know, the school system, and we pay them with ESSER funds, that the nurse would say, I need you to go to so-and-so's room and get with the teacher and find out, you know, help with the contact tracing, who this one individual is around that's now positive. So it would be kind of like a go-between between the nurse and the teacher. I don't know if that's feasible. It's just a thought.
The only note that I would just make to the board as it related to those support personnel positions, again, would be the challenge of finding anybody to fill the position. The intent, I think, is a potentially strong one in terms of what you might be asking of that individual and what pay grade that might be, and 22 people and what would be associated with that. That might be something we would need to explore a little bit further before we took action on it. The intent, as I said, Ms. Holt, is a strong one, but there's some elements to that that would have to be worked out.
I think
right. Yeah, there's some probably unintended stuff that might go with that, but just to at least look into it.
I was going to say, Ms. Holt, I think you waited till Blair left the room so he wouldn't fall over backwards.
Right, what just happened?
At the hiring 22
Ms. Holt would like us to hire
employees.
22 new employees.
22 new employees.
He was out of the room when you asked that.
Well, yeah, give Mr. Rhodes a call tomorrow morning, and we'll work on that.
If I could follow up with a question, how many of these, I'm going to call them quarantine support staff, did we hire?
We allowed a position at every school. So that looks a little bit different everywhere. So we had some employees that were available for additional employment. We had employees that were available for full-time employment, but every school site has that support personnel.
And I'm just wondering if that's something they could help with, because when you look at the cases, I know that, with 23 schools, we had 34 cases, and that's a little over one per school, but I'm just thinking maybe that's something that person could assist with if time allows. If we could somehow get the instruction, real-time instruction, broadcast, live stream, I don't know my technology terms, to our students, particularly in 612, then that may ease up some of the burden of these facilitators. I don't know. That's just a thought.
We can absolutely explore kind of all options for that. We're really trying to refine that instructional piece, like how they're supporting the instructional capacity as those numbers go, kind of to Mrs. Case's point as well. But I think we will want to be evaluating how these best can be used moving forward.
Yeah.
And potentially, if we were to see the trend data continue down, that the availability for them to assist in other ways would expand.
I just want to say, looking at data, those numbers, I mean, I hate for us to have one positive case or one child quarantined, but those numbers, I mean, that says volumes to our school staff about their diligence in insisting that children wear masks properly, insisting that we cleanse and sanitize high-touch surfaces daily, and all those kind of layers of safety protocols. That speaks volumes.
Yes, ma'am.
Our staff, they're working very diligently.
And I would love to highlight some of those additional successes, exactly as we say. So what is it we should be really, really proud of right now as we continue to move forward is we have established, and Mr. Bridges, you stole my thunder there, but this unwavering focus on the value of in-person learning. You're exactly right. Our kids are in school, and they're in school every day, and we are doing everything we can do to prepare and to serve them in that space. I have to speak to the energy and the enthusiasm and the resilience of our students. I've been proud to say I've been in our schools talking to our students and seeing their resilient approach to this learning environment and to, again, all that they're being faced with right now. The commitment, the creativity, and the resilience of our staff. There's not a single person that I know that didn't wish all of this was in the rearview mirror. And yet, we've had to take it on head on again. We'd have to take it on head on knowing what the challenges are. And that fourth bullet is that stepping up well beyond the job description. We have certified staff who are driving school buses every day. We have certified and non-certified staff flexing their coverage without planning periods to cover classes where there is no support personnel. We have individuals assisting with that contact tracing investigation and supporting what's taking place in our school environments. And again, folks continuing to say, I'm not going to say that's not my job. That is a powerful commitment to who we are as a school system and continuing to do that. We have community partners, and many of them have been listed when we talk about what we do to serve and support students, not just in need but beyond. When we think about the relationships that we have, the service that's being provided, the generosity that's being shown. Just recently, as you probably saw, Publix donating thousands of dollars of gift cards to our education foundation to support students and families in need. Like, you can't celebrate those kinds of stories enough. And then the generosity of communities and others. We're talking a lot about Henderson County Public Schools, but our neighbors in Haywood County and Transylvania County experienced real disaster recently. And it was our own students. We're at a football game in Transylvania. Our own students from East Henderson High School deciding that they wanted to raise funds in the stands to donate back to those school communities. It was our own students at North Henderson High School deciding that they wanted to raise funds in the stands to help another community. Amidst everything that we're dealing with, you know what our school communities are doing? They're thinking about somebody else. They're thinking about somebody else that's got it more difficult, more challenging than we have. And if there's something to be inspired by, it's our own kids taking the lead on that. It's standing in the stands and saying, you know what, there's somebody else that's dealing with difficulty right now, and we need to reach out and support them in every way that we can. And that's certainly something to celebrate.
Despite the fact that these students have to wear these masks, I visited several schools this past couple of weeks. They are absolutely thrilled to be back in school.
Yes, sir.
I attended a football game here last Friday night, and the excitement in their faces was just in awe. It's just wonderful. They're glad to be back.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Despite these things.
I'll just say something about what exactly I said this last meeting, but I have a couple girls now. Our boy just graduated, but they had friends over, and they were in the kitchen. And I was like, what do y'all think of masks? And they're like, oh, Dad, don't vote for masks. Oh, those things are terrible. Those are why. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. What would you, if you get sent home because you're not wearing masks, how would you feel about that? They're like, Dad, we'll wear the masks. And I was like, yeah. I mean, you need to be in school. And, I make light of it, but that's what our job is. That's why we're sitting up here making these decisions. These kids have got to be in school for a myriad of reasons. But, it's a good job.
That's been our focus. So the last slide's one you've seen many, many, many times. I don't even know how many times at this point, but we continue. Everything we do is fluid. We have to be contingent on what's taking place. We continue to work in close coordination with our partner agencies. We're going to be responsive to the direction questions and concerns that we get, and we will continue to meet the instructional obligations and meet that challenge, as we said, of how we serve and support every student. It is that data set that hopefully can allow the board to take into consideration new business item A. Glad to answer any more questions that you might have, Mr. Craven.
So the new board, new item, which will be a new item every month, essentially says that we are going to approve the continuation of the current face covering guidance as presented. If anyone else has a question, this is the time to discuss that. Ms. Holt, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
No, I do not have any questions.
All right. If there are none, I will take a motion if someone would like to make it. I'll make the motion. I move that the Henderson County Board of Public Education approve the continuation of the current face covering guidance as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bridges, yes or no? Yes. Ms. Case, yes or no? Mr. Egoff, yes or no? Ms. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis?
Yes.
And Mrs. Holt?
No.
And I am a yes. It passes 6-1. Moving on. Does anybody need a break? We've been here for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. Do y'all need a break? Y'all ready to power through?
Power through.
Power through.
Yeah, we're fine.
All right, here we go. Let's get moving then. These next are going to be pretty quick. This is going to be Mr. Bernie Sosha, Inkjet Incorporated DBA Community Chemical Contract. This is our sanitation wipes, correct? Okay. 83 pages.
Okay. Hold on. I'm hijacking a different microphone here.
Make sure your mic's on. Make sure it works. Pull it down your face.
All right, yes. This is to discuss about approving a bid to award a contract for the sanitation wipes that was sent out in an email from Dr. Bryant on August 12th that we took out bids for, we got 6 responses, and that Inkjet was the lowest responsive bidder, and that we would like to award the contract to them. All of the parameters were set so that we could exceed $250,000. That is not saying we are going to exceed them. We just wanted to make sure that when we put it out to bid, we weren't going to find ourselves back in a bid situation again middle of the year because the threshold had to go up.
Does anybody have any questions on this one? You get any free printer ink with buying that much?
Definitely an example of how a company has adapted in this environment.
Inkjet is selling whatever. I'll take a motion when someone's ready.
I move that the Henderson County Board of Public Education approve the attached contract with a specified vendor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. Mr. Bridges?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis?
Yes.
Mrs. Holt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Passes 7-0. Next up is going to be UG Micro Purchasing Threshold Increase.
Sounds interesting, doesn't it?
It does sound amazing.
The reason this one is brought to you is that part of the uniform guidance has required that anytime we spend federal funds in the excess of $10,000, we had to bid everything out. And what they have recently discovered is that there is a way for you each year to allow us to increase that threshold to $30,000 for purchase of goods and $50,000 for service contracts without requiring the full bid process. So that is what we are asking for you today, is to authorize us to make such purchases with the regular thresholds that we already have in place for our state and local funds.
So this is a bit different than what we've normally done, and so I think a lot of times what has happened is that when we have the bid threshold and we're needing to get masks or wipes or whatever the case may be, it can definitely hold up some of those contracts and getting that information when we have to send it out to bid, see if they're a minority-owned business or a woman-owned business, and get all the 83 pages back, find the lowest possible bid, and then finally go through with the contract. This gives them a little bit more flexibility to be able to make a purchase. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, sir, that's absolutely correct, and especially as it relates to the uniform guidance, because we're talking about the differentiation between federal funds, state funds, and local funds. And so this would be consistent with our current policy as it relates to other funding sources and gives us more fluidity to be able to address those needs. That was perfectly stated, sir.
So, so does anybody have any questions? This is essentially for the federal guidelines, not state guidelines. All right, I'll take a motion when you're ready.
I make a motion that we approve the micro purchase threshold increase.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Mr. Bridges. Yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff? Ms. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis?
Yes.
Mrs. Holt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, passes 7-0. All right, next is another sole source vendor.
Yes, the first one, Curriculum Associates, you had already approved them to be a sole source, but what we have done is added it again to modify it to add a different federal funding source. So that is why they are back again this month. And Securely is something that is the software that Technology has purchased, and one of the funding sources that we have for that is a Title IV federal program, so they have to be on this list as well.
Are you just moving this from, basically it's just moving the code that we're going from, we're going to pay for this with ESSER versus state funds or local funds? It's literally the only difference, right?
Yeah, we're just adding a second federal source to the list for, yeah.
Just another one of those 10,000 codes you have in there to plug it in.
Yes, sir.
So we have approved this one before, just in a different, from the state funds being used to purchase it. Does that make sense? Does anybody else have questions? All right, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the specified vendors as vendor under the sole source exemption guidelines.
It's hard to read those sometimes. Do I have a second? Is there any more discussion on this? All right, Mr. Bridges, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff, Ms. Caskey, Dr. Revis?
Yes.
Mrs. Holt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. It passes 7-0.
Thank you.
All right. This one was Dr. Fry, but this is going to be Dr. Bryan, I guess?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And in short, we've referenced it a couple of times, but what you see here is now Henderson County Public Schools School Mental Health Improvement Plan. And again, this is a request for approval by the board, formalizing the implementation of what we would do to promote student mental health, well-being, our assessment, and improving upon those supports. Again, Mr. Grubmeyer did an outstanding job outlining the overview of all of the different practices in place, but we are required now under general statute to approve a mental health plan. We have to have one on file and submit it according to that. And so in effect, this mental health plan would outline it in that way. And so it would formalize our support of that. I'm certain that Mr. Grubmeyer would be glad to answer any other questions if you have any about the plan itself, or I'd be glad to speak to any elements as well. Once again, if I could highlight the exceptional work that goes into what you see here, the structures that are in place, the clarity of purpose, and the support that's been provided, it's a real credit to our student services leadership.
Absolutely. I do want to add a couple of things here. SEL is not CRT. Never has been, never will be. And I know everything's trying to get commingled into that. I think on our North Carolina district report card. I think there's a few things that we need to work on, and I think we're going to see a lot more of this as we figure out what COVID has really done to our schools in terms of if kids are behind or whatever they're behind on or whatever. And I think number one is going to be black males are 4 to 5 times higher rates of suspension than, or males had 4 to 5 times higher suspension rate than females, and black students were higher disproportionately than any of their peers. And the one that we had talked about quite a while ago, and it's still prevalent, and I know it's difficult, and it's a difficult situation, is that 36% of our Henderson County student body is non-white. Only 2% of our teachers identify as non-white, and that is something that we continually have to go through, and I know that COVID has made this even more difficult, but we still have to persevere and find ways and avenues to get more teachers that look like our kids so we can have better outcomes for all. That's all I really wanted to say on that one.
Yeah, I'm going to build on SDL is not CRT. I want to make sure that's heard a few times. But in listening to the 4 students who spoke beautifully here, I mean, we certainly respect every opinion that comes up here, and I believe that their struggles are really difficult, but the words I kept hearing over and over again were anxiety, devastated, struggling, overwhelmed. So we obviously need some type of student and school mental health thing when we have students who are struggling, and maybe it is just because of COVID now, but we know that's other reasons at other times. Absolutely. So, if you just listen to our kids, which we all do, because that's what we do for a living, right? Just listening to those kids, I just kept writing down the words that they were saying, and it reiterated why we need to do this. So,
thank you. Ms. Grummeyer, I really appreciate you and your team. I know that you guys are going to have, and you're having right now, the hardest time that any school social workers ever had, and it's going to be worse as we hopefully come out of this eventually. But I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your team. You guys are doing an awesome job. I know it's a lot of times it's behind the scenes and it's not flashy like Dr. Bryant, but
I would like to reiterate that. Mr. Grummeyer did a great job in presenting that plan to us. I think we need to realize that our children, their physical, emotional, social well-being is just as important, if not more important, as our mental health of our students. And we have to be on top of our mental health for our students and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And if I might add, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a place where not only is it known and felt, but you will continue to hear from us new ways to broaden that support, because much like the school nurse conversation, we have half the number of social workers serving our entire school system in these most important ways. And so when you think about the workload that you acknowledged and the need to continue to expand the way that we support this most important work, yes, they feel that energy, but we are going to be continuing to talk about ways that we can continue to broaden that support.
Absolutely.
May I just ask a point of clarification? It's for only 1 year, or is the plan is only implemented for 1 year, or is it approved for multiple years? It says for the 21-22 school year.
If I read it correctly, the legislature is going to make us come back to this every year because it's an improvement plan, correct?
Okay.
Yes, I think that's true. The legislation requires a yearly review of both its effectiveness, right, and the changes that you would make. Now, whether that yearly review requires yearly board approval, I would have to defer to folks with more understanding of the law than that.
Does that work?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Mrs. Holt, do you have any questions?
I was just wondering if Mr. Grummeyer could go over a little bit of SEL for the public.
Yes, ma'am, I'm happy to do that. Can you help me a little bit with any particular items that they might be interested in?
So I have looked through the curriculum on this, and I feel like there's a lot of misinformation about what we are doing in our schools. I saw a lot of examples and videos on like the way teachers welcome kids in their room and speaking, to them by using their name, including everybody, and, making sure you're asking specific questions of kids, like just making them feel wanted. And I feel like there's this information that's out there that is like we're teaching, that we're sitting down with children in classrooms and saying that, you need to accept so-and-so over here because they're a different color than you, like pointing out kids. And do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am, I think I do. And I think that your question is exactly on target. And I'm pleased to report that at the core of our expectations of all Henderson County staff when it comes to social and emotional learning are mostly the 3 signature practices that are offered to us from CASEL. Those signature practices are something that we mentioned in tonight's presentation, but they are basically a welcoming ritual so that students feel the warmth and affection and connection with their teachers at the very beginning of every school day and at the very beginning of every lesson, so that they might learn more, but also so that the speed at which they form relationships with those teachers will be accelerated. The second part of the signature practice is to have engaging instruction. And I'm looking at Dr. Revis looking at me going, well, that is certainly nothing new, because we have wanted engaging instruction since there has been instruction at all, right? But what engaging instruction does for children who might be facing a mental health issue is that it keeps them engaged in ways that help them be successful in school and at least take one of the barriers out of the road. But also, when students connect with their teacher about instruction because they're excited about the content, or they're impressed with the teacher's competence, or the child develops a curiosity to learn even more than what's being taught that day, that helps to form that exact same relationship that will be a protective factor if that child experiences difficulty. And then the final part of the signature practices, the third of the 3 parts, is to send students away optimistic that they can return the next day and be successful and have another good day at school. That really is the core expectation around social and emotional learning. Now, when you mention curricula, those are also items that are a long-standing part of the guidance curriculum, and they're being taught in our schools as well. And those are the pro-social behaviors that Ms. Caskey asked me about earlier in the evening. And those things are things that help kids be good at school, but also to be successful in life.
I think, Amy, a lot of times those folks that want to parallel social emotional learning to CRT and saying you're putting CRT in school, they're going to think it no matter what because it's been said somewhere, we know that critical race theory is not being taught to kindergartners as they walk into the door, but I think sometimes people are going to think whatever they're going to think,
And aren't there also...
Yes, that is correct. And it's my understanding that we have been doing this, was it in 2020, early 2020 when we started?
You were doing this a while.
Yes.
Aren't there also sample?
Yeah,
there are
okay.
sample lesson plans and activities. I mean, I was able to find a bunch this weekend of sample activities, and they were all just like so positive. They reminded me a lot of The Leader in Me.
They're a lot like The Leader in Me.
They really are. Just
Yeah.
packaged, a little bit. I thought better. Sorry.
Instilling good citizenship.
It was instilling good citizenship and self-confidence, and I mean, it was easy for me to find, and I wonder if we could just have some of that transparency for the folks who think, oh my gosh, they're brainwashing our kids, just to show them a few of these examples of activities of what they're doing, and they're so innocuous and so healthy for these kids' souls that why wouldn't we want to do that?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Caskey. And innocuous was one of the words that was kind of running through my brain. And I will, of course, do however I'm directed from the board and from leadership to make this effort as transparent as we need for it to be.
Please do.
I'm absolutely confident that that this curricula is great for every kid, especially those children who otherwise might struggle in our school system. The exact children that you guys were talking about earlier in the evening who are not doing as well as we want them to do right now, these things are supports especially for them.
I think this board understands that, but I think there's a broader mistrust of everything right now, and everything's getting thrown into this big bad basket. So the more transparency we can have, the better. I'm not sure it's necessarily going to stop the ones that are saying it's the start to blah, 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 or whatever down the road. But sure, as much transparency we can have, like I've always said, is always best. Yes, Mrs. Holt?
Yeah, and I keep getting emails or messages that can we opt out of my child receiving this? Like it's a lesson that we sit down and I'm trying to explain to parents that it's like as your kid is coming in the door, you know, Mrs. Smith is saying, "Good morning, Johnny. How are you? How was your weekend? We missed you." It's just intentional interactions that the teacher are making with their kids.
Right. It's not at 10:15 you go to SEL class.
I think there's
Correct.
such a benefit, and I really appreciate the opportunity for us to have shared with you as the program highlight this piece, because if we just went to slide 5, right, if you just went to slide 5 and it just said what is social emotional learning within that demonstration, and you look at the North Carolina Healthy Living Standards, and you look at the way that that's defined within the context of school, exactly as Mrs. Holt is saying, and exactly as we well know, is teaching responsibility and empathy and understanding of ourselves. That's it, right? And the way that is embedded within our support to students in classrooms comes with calling you by name when you come in the classroom and recognizing who you are and checking in on you and asking questions about how you can be successful. And then that most important thing is when you're with us, that the learning is highly engaging. We want to be able to support you in a highly engaged learning environment. So I think there's really powerful representation here about how we communicate that moving forward. So appreciate that work.
And if there's no further questions, comments, or concerns, I will accept a motion.
I move the Henderson County Board of Education approve the Henderson County Public School Mental Health Improvement Plan for this school year 2021-22.
I second.
Now, is there any other discussion? If there is none, Mr. Bridges, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Egoff?
Sir.
Ms. Caskey?
Yes.
Dr. Revis?
Yes.
Mrs. Holt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. It passes 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Grummeyer. Appreciate it a lot. All right. Next is discussion is going to be the naming of facility request for HHS Auditorium. Dr. John Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Craven, and members of the board. If I could just give a little bit of history. We have heard from some folks in our community today, but also want to just share with you a little bit about the work that has been done up until this point. I believe Ms. Self, who is still there, she is. It's good to see you today. Ms. Self reached out to me in May of 2021, inquiring a little bit more about Henderson County Public Schools protocols and procedures for exploring the recommendation of naming a particular facility after an individual in our community. So I shared with her the details of Policy 9300 as it related to that specific work. And at that time, she began to solicit letters of support from individuals in the community. At first request back to the board, a letter included 70-plus letters of support from individuals in the community. As we now know, the receipt of those letters now exceeds over 100, in addition to public comments that have been supported in that respect, what you've heard today and otherwise. We've had additional information that's been submitted to us and shared with you throughout this process as it relates to the endorsement for that. And again, the ongoing conversation associated with it. And so at the request of the board chair and the vice chair, we've included this as an agenda item, an opportunity for the board to discuss that element, the request that's at the table. And then again, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have about that process. Again, I would note back to Policy 9300, which we have as a board procedure as it relates to being in receipt of such requests, the board giving the opportunity to give consideration to those, and then discussion before any action might take place. glad to address any other elements to that, Mr. Craven, if you'd like me to.
That'd be good right there. I was hoping Mr. Wilkins was going to join us today, but he is not here. Discussion amongst the board. You've seen what we've received as far as the letters go. Folks talking today, so on and so forth, about the auditorium. I am a HHS alumni, go Bearcats, as well as Mr. Egoff here. I'd like to see if anybody else has any questions, comments, concerns about how we name, first how we name stuff, what's in our policy, what that process is, and do we need to take consideration? This is a discussion item. We don't have a motion that's on the table right now to approve or disapprove of anything. This is just a discussion amongst us. So, anybody have any questions?
What is the policy number, Dr. Bryan?
I'm sorry, it's 9300, Dr. Revis. As it relates to the policy manual associated with that, I'd be glad to read the bullets associated with it if that'd be helpful. And potentially we may be able to pull that up on the screen from our website while we're doing that. So Matthew's on it right there. In short, I'll read this to you. The criteria that's being asked to be considered as it relates to that is the board considers naming the facilities to be a significant endeavor, since the name of the facility can reflect upon students, staff, school system, and community. Superintendent shall involve staff and students assigned to the facility and the students' parents in the process of identifying possible names for a new facility or facility being renamed. Other members of the community may also submit possible facility names to the superintendent in writing, which has been done so in this case. Superintendent shall consider the following criteria as well as other factors to determine identifying potential names for the facility. 1, the name should not be so similar to the names of existing facilities as to cause confusion. The name should include a designation of the type of school, such as elementary, middle, high, or a brief description of the specialized name of the school. 3, the name may be in honor or memory of an individual who's helped students in this school system succeed through financial contributions or educational leadership. 4, the name may be that of an educational leader of prominence and reputation beyond the school system. However, priority will be given to names of educational leaders who have directly or indirectly helped students in the school system to succeed. And 5, schools or other facilities normally will be named based on geographic locations or other site-specific identifiers, such as townships, roads, natural features, historic sites, or other community landmarks. Again, the superintendent shall submit a recommended name or a list of recommended names to the board for approval. And so in this instance, the recommendation is not coming from the superintendent. It is coming from another community member who asked us to give consideration to a space specifically, who's provided additional support and documentation endorsing that. And as we said, we've received letters of support, which each of you have received on that behalf from members of the community, alumni, and others.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
So I'd like to hear, we have educators here, and we have an educator who was a phenomenal one at Hendersonville High School, and Tom Moore. He was superintendent or school board chair on this board as well, and did a lot of great things for Henderson County. We haven't named many things before. We have 2 schools that have names of, one was a former superintendent, and the other was a prominent person in our town a long time ago. We do have some football fields named, and we have some basketball courts named. I'm not aware of any auditoriums named in our school system that we have right now. And so I'd really like to hear from the teachers, the folks that, Miss Cases of the world, from the Dr. Revises of the world, from Miss Caskies of the world, is that when you start, in my opinion, when you start naming after specific teachers, I think I can name probably 3 or 4 teachers right now that I would want, that I think would deserve something. And Miss Case is a prime example. How many years were you at North Henderson High School? 100 years. So, rounding down, 100 years. And so I'd really like to hear your opinion. Yes, ma'am?
I have something. I just wanted to correct that East Henderson's auditorium is named after somebody. It's named after a student. I can give you the name. Give me one second.
Is it named after a student?
Michelle Burns.
Michelle Burns.
Yes, she's correct. It is named after Michelle Burns. I cannot speak to the history of that naming.
Okay. Great. Well, that's okay. This is a conversation between us. So, Ms. Case, do you have anything that you would like to add?
We had a suggestion from someone who said the Thomas E. Orr Teachers Auditorium. You know, that covers other people. It doesn't specifically, but, you know, maybe we need to take that into thought too.
You know, I know Blair, and I have a lot of respect for you as just chair, and you have some great ideas. And you were talking about, I think it was public, I hope so, but you were talking about, you know, you wanted to encourage, you know, giving to the schools.
Absolutely.
And that's right on, because we fight for money every month.
Absolutely.
You know, and I realized that. I thought about it. I was talking to Dr. Revis, and
I'll throw you
There's a lot. He's about to.
No, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus.
Feel that bus backing up.
No, but you know, I agreed though, because I was like, you know, and she said something really, and I hope I'm saying this right.
Oh yes, you're fine.
You said something about, you know, it's too bad, or you shouldn't have to have a lot of something, a lot of money, or a lot of land, or you shouldn't have to have a lot of something to feel like you can make a difference in somebody's life.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm like, well, I had English with Mr. Orr, and I just know he was such a, you know, running the senior play. I mean, it was such a, you know, and I just, you know, and he didn't have, he didn't have the type of money to be given, or the type of land like Atkinson, or the type of whatever to be, you know, and what you said meant a lot to me. And I said, I know. I mean, you shouldn't have to be, you know, to make a big difference. And I'm sitting there wondering, I'm like, there were all these letters that we had, and all these people that came up and spoke, and I mean, I think most of the people here are still for that, and you know, this guy must have made a difference on me, but I know all of y'all were not there, so it's hard to realize, you know, but I'm like, well, he did, and so I just hope, I mean, I understand about the money, land, I mean, I want to.
This man has had not only an influence in our school system, but also in our entire community.
Yeah, and he did a lot of stuff after retirement that kept him, you know, in the light.
What I'd like to know is, why is Mr. Wilkins against it, and why, from what I heard, and I haven't seen this, the Alumni Association was not supportive of it.
I don't know the reason. I do know when the school board voted for the Jim Pardue Gymnasium, he was against that. I was not. I don't know if you were on the board.
I wasn't even in school then. I wasn't in high school then. I was in
because when you know, Pardue was a truant officer, so obviously I didn't know what everybody else knew. You know, and I never saw Pardue either. I mean, I'm just saying. But, you know, but that was brought up to the board, and Mr. Wilkins was 100% against it. He just doesn't like doing that, and I think he is part of the Alumni Association. In fact, I know he is, because I used to be on the Alumni Association, and, you know, and he probably, you know, he's got some influences there. I mean, he's a very good educator, and a lot of years and a lot of respect, and, you know, if he doesn't like it personally, the board that he's on might not like it personally. I mean, that's just a guess. I don't know. I'm not.
I guess where I get a little confused about this whole issue is I'm reading our policy, and our policy clearly says the superintendent shall involve staff and students assigned to the facility and the students' parents in the process of identifying possible names. And I read on down that the superintendent then is considering this criteria, and that he he submits a list of recommended names. Now, I'm just going by this policy, so I'm confused as to where we are.
Right, well, that's why this is a discussion.
Okay, so
And
the
that's
superintendent is not recommending, or you don't have a slate of names.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. And I think that's a perfect clarification as
Okay.
it relates to how our policy currently works. If we were to go back in time for a moment and the board said, we'd like to name this auditorium after someone, we're going to direct you to solicit input and feedback and otherwise, and then we want you to come back to us with a slate of names or a name or a recommendation. Certainly that would be the direction that we would take. Because other members of the community can submit those to us and had done so, again, without a slate or a request from this board to solicit names to recommend. At this time, I'm not presenting one. If the board would like me to do so, I'd be glad to do so. If the board feels like it would be appropriate to have scope of what is named in the school system and how that has worked and who those people represent, as we mentioned to Mrs. Burns or otherwise, or if you're seeking that work on my part, again, I certainly work at the pleasure of the board.
I'm someone who does the whataboutism, which I don't think is a real thing, but I'm just looking at this group of educators who surround me, and these are Henderson County educators, and we know that Dot's been here 100 years, she said. So between the three of them, we probably have 320 years. No. Obviously, we have about 120, 130 years between these educators, and you start to look at, I mean, Dad could probably relate to this. The easiest way to get a ton of information to students is a gallery walk. And I was walking about 2 weeks ago when we had discussed this. I was walking through the hallway here, and I saw the gallery walk of all the teachers who have been inducted into the Henderson County Education Hall of Fame. And Mr. Rohr is among them, obviously well-deserved, needless to say. And I looked at that list and I was like, well, who on this list is not deserving of having a country named for them, never mind a building, because obviously we know our teachers are the backbone of a community. And what concerns me, and I think that Mr. Orr's name should be submitted if we are going to have a list of this, but you know, I looked at, so then I tried to narrow it down, well, Hendersonville High, because that's their school, so maybe it should be somebody who had an impact there. I went to Mary Valentine Mims. I mean, she taught the 9th Avenue School from 1947 to 1965, I believe. And when the school was integrated at Hendersonville High, she was one of the first black teachers there, taught another 22 years, and then served 25 years on the Blue Ridge Community Board of Trustees. And I'm like, well, again, I never want to sit there and say, well, this one's better than this one, and this one's better. I think what starts to happen is we start to say, well, which teacher is more deserving? And that kind of worries me, because I think so many teachers have an impact on so many people's lives that I feel like we're leaving out a lot of people by not going through the process that we have.
I would like for us to go through the process. I don't discount the community members, and I think their opinion is very valuable.
Sure.
But I also think we cannot discount our current staff and students who attend that school. I want them to have a voice as well in some way. I hate to throw work on everybody, but I just feel like we've got to hear their voice.
Yeah, I mean, it's the superintendent's job to bring that to us,
Yeah.
bring a recommended list. The reason that I put this on the agenda, we did not have this originally on the agenda. I added it after a fact because I wanted you guys to be heard. I wanted there to be a voice to come and discuss it. And so here we are, and I'd like to go through and I'd like to do the process of, let's see what all's named. Let's figure out the whole naming. Let's follow our policy. Let's talk to the students. Let's talk to the staff at Hendersonville High School, because I haven't gotten any of those emails from any of those folks that are currently working there. But please, just let us finish our work. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go through the process, and then we'll go go from there. Yes, Mrs. Holt. Amy?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, reflecting over this period, this has been in both papers, Times News and the Lightning, and we haven't had anybody, or at least I haven't, received any emails against this. I know Mr. Wilkins has some reserve about this. He also did when they named the gym, the party gym. And I understand the train of thought. If you start naming things after educators, what about all of the other educators? Like, I realize that. But there's a big voice in our community that wants this. And I think that it definitely doesn't hurt to go through what our policy says and to let the superintendent do some work and having people at the school, the students, the parents, the faculty have a voice in this. I definitely would like to hear from the Alumni Association as a board, from Mr. Wilkins, from the students that are there, from the staff. I think that we kind of owe it to go through this process.
I agree.
I agree.
So may I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
So is it, what I'm hearing, is it the desire of the board to specifically name the auditorium at Hendersonville High School, and when we describe go through the process, that you expect, as is outlined here, a slate of names or a name based on that community feedback in order that the auditorium space specifically is named at the end?
If that's what you believe is best interest for us to name the auditorium at all even, then you would bring us names at that point. But if your recommendation is for us not to, then you would do that as well.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Is there any more questions, comments, concerns on this matter? We'll bring this back at a future date.
Just one question for clarification. The building that the auditorium is in is the Stillwell building.
It's the Stillwell building.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No change in that.
No.
But the auditorium currently has no name?
It's the auditorium.
It's the auditorium. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, moving on. Next is going to be the approval resolution authorizing conveyance of real property to Henderson County. This is an exciting one. Dr. Bryant, actually the resolution in there still has a B, so.
Yes, sir, it does. If I might, I have to apologize. I failed to properly note for our friends at Campbell Shatley that B, when you look at the resolution, is not to be included in this parcel transfer. That's actually the drive that allows you to access Bruce Drysdale Elementary School. So we'll be striking B from this resolution, and with that amendment to this resolution, then it could be considered for approval, Mr. Craven. So my apologies, that's my error.
That's okay. Questions, comments, concerns on this? Been working on this for a long time, so this is that conveyance to the county. Hopefully next month we'll get that from the city, and then we will have a new athletic facility for Hendersonville High School and hopefully for the community at large if we can build it big enough. Any questions? All right, I'm losing everybody. Everybody's leaving, going to the bathroom. Well, we need a motion. Can somebody make a motion? Okay. I'm going to make the motion then. Where's it at? Where's the motion, Dr. Bryant?
You can just say motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the
of
resolution authorizing conveyance of the real property to the county of Henderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. Mr. Bridges.
Yes.
Ms. Case.
Yes.
Mr. Egoff.
Yes, sir.
And then Mrs. Holt.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. It passes 6-0. There was Dr. Revis was not present for that. All right, return to learn we've already done. Carl, construction update. Let's look at that auditorium.
Yes, sir, we will.
Now, let me ask you real quick. Is there like another auditorium in the new school, or is it just one auditorium?
One auditorium.
No, sir, it's one auditorium.
That's
It's
what
the
I thought.
same auditorium we've been in for 100 years.
That's right. Just making sure.
All right, good evening, board members. I'll give you a quick construction update on our project. So beginning with Hendersonville High School, since that has been the most recent topic for us. Looking at the Stillwell interior, the ongoing projects that are going on within that space, the sprinkler system installation, the HVAC duct work, framing and drywall is ongoing, as well as electrical data and intercom wiring.
I saw Maggie Carnival, and I was talking to her about those ceiling tiles. Those are actually ceiling tiles from the early 1900s. They're like clay ceiling tiles. They've got to cover them up. They didn't know they were there. So they're supposed to be just awesome. Like they've never used anything like that anymore. But right now, our HVAC, I think, is sitting underneath those, and then we got a drywall over top of them. But when they pulled it out, those are all clay ceiling tiles for every room. That's really cool. Imagine how much that would cost to do that now.
It is cool.
Sorry.
Nope, you are fine. And so as we look at these couple of photos here from the demo work inside, again, the demo work is complete at this point in time. And so as Mr. Craven is mentioning, the work now to cover up the ceiling and updates are taking place. So here are a couple of photos of the framing that is ongoing there in the Stillwell building to create those new classroom spaces, as well as that duct work that you see.
Hey.
And then here is or on the right is a picture of the auditorium there at Hendersonville High School. And so that demo work has been completed at this point in time, and so now the updates can begin. When we look at the exterior of the Stillwell building, the three projects going on outside that building, the brick and mortar repointing is continuing. The courtyard final grading is continuing, as well as the installation of exterior windows. So these next couple of photos will show you that exterior work.
Good secret.
We can see here on the stadium side of the Stillwell building, those second and third floors, you can see those new windows that have been installed, and the scaffolding on the outside for that repointing to take place, as well as the window installation.
So exciting.
We look at the courtyard area, that grading work continues, and again, the repointing on that side of the building as well.
The only question I have is, have we dipped into any of our capital reserves yet?
For this project, no,
The Hendersonville High School project, because I know there's at least a couple $100,000 on Stillwell. There was another $600,000 or something like that, $400,000 for the new building. And as far as I know, we have not touched any contingency funds whatsoever. About $1 million in contingency that's still sitting right there.
I will have to ask that question to make sure that I'm telling you correct.
Yeah, make sure.
Okay.
Mr. Bridges, yes, sir.
You go back to the 3 levels. Are they going to sandblast any of the brick on that original building?
At this point, the work that's been completed is the repointing, so those grout lines, yes. As we transition to the rugby project, that one is very close to being completed. They received the CO there right as school was getting ready to begin in August. The furniture delivery installation, when the slide was created, was supposed to start September 15th due to delays, but that actually began today. And so the furniture there for the office area is taking place, and then the front desk area will be next week. And then the other project that is going on is that freezer replacement there at the maintenance warehouse. And so the 3 parts that are completed there, the panel walls, the concrete trench, and insulation, those parts of that project have been completed. And then the estimated date of completion for that one is the end of October. All right, so this time I will answer any questions that you may have.
The only question I have is, now that we've just approved the resolution for the conveyance of the real property to Henderson County, you're going to be receiving some dollars because of that, which means that we can now go on to upward, correct, and start getting that project knocked out. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Good.
Yes, sir, absolutely. In fact, that work is being pushed back out as it relates to requests for qualifications so that that contract period that had been delayed would be able to move forward. So we look forward to giving you an update on that real soon.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up is going to be, are any other questions for Carl? Amy, got any questions? Okay. Equity update. I'm guessing you're going to handle this, Dr. Bryant?
Yes, and I do want to promise everybody, Dr. Fry will be back next month, so you don't have to you don't have to listen to me do this. But I'm as excited about this as she would be right now, because when we talk about the board's charge to remove barriers, this graduation update from our summer learning and what we've seen over the process of the most recent couple of months is really significant. I'd love to just share with you a couple of data points. When we start talking about a look at our numbers, the number of students who graduated versus the number of students who were early graduates, again, look at that. That's 104 students more than 2020, 130 early graduates, 23 seniors graduated after summer learning. How critically important that is. Those are students who are now set on that next chapter of their life and how important those summer learning opportunities were. So we're just so proud of these data.
I think one thing we need to talk about, though, down the road is Hendersonville High School, you can't graduate early, correct?
That's correct.
Because it's a 7-period day, and it's the only school that we have that's on a 7-period day?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And so when you take a look at this, summer learning, again, I'm going to just highlight the bottom line as you take a look at this. Look at the number of credits that were awarded, the number of students that received those credits. It's almost 400 students received one or more credits from being involved in summer learning. When you talk about advancing toward opportunity, advancing toward graduation, 23 students we said already graduating as a result of that. And then the number of students who were promoted based on those credits. So moving up to the next grade level, otherwise 115. So we ask ourselves, that research that Dr. Revis did about the importance of highly engaging, project-based learning, opportunities for students to begin to move forward, that bridge between the completion of a school year to moving forward, this really celebrates and highlights that work. Number of seniors, oh yes ma'am.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that this highly impacts lowering our dropout rate.
Yes.
Or increasing our graduation rate, I should say, in more positive terms. Because when students, high school students, start getting behind in their credits earned, they're setting themselves up.
Absolutely. And we know that every credit loss does that very thing, right? It slows down that progression toward graduation and graduating on time, as you mentioned there. 581, I love this number. Number of seniors who took at least one advanced placement community college or online course. 581 students. Remember, that graduation number was just over 1,000 students. And so when we talk about more than half of our students being engaged in these high-level courses, that's an increase of 125.
Now, that's the seniors. How many total, do you know?
How many of those passed their AP exams?
Well, you know, those are great Dr. Fry questions. I would be glad. I told her I'd make sure she had something to do when she got back. And so we're going to make sure that she'll answer the number. I don't know the number of, I know that we are really proud that we have some high pass rates in some courses. We're continuing to move forward in some other courses. When we start talking about how many kids are affected in these spaces, we'll come back with some of those numbers.
I mean, because I know the early college, you could go ahead and add 200 kids to the total, right? To whatever that number, because they're at the community college.
Well, no matter what, that's money in parents' pockets.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. Especially when you think about our articulation, our CCP courses with the community college, and you think about what that really means. If that coursework existed when I was in school, I would have taken advantage of every opportunity for it. It is powerful, powerful opportunities. So really, really good stuff there. And again, celebration. And again, we tip our cap, that graduation cap. Just a couple of other things to share from summer learning. When we talk about learning gains, we already, as we said, have some of our summary data associated with what we're seeing in terms of student support. When we look at iReady and our reading data, we saw up to a half a year's growth in math and up to a full year's growth in reading. Again, those students were in school for 20 days. When we think about the value of the structure of the work that we did, the identification of the student populations that we served, a full year's worth of growth in reading in just that period of time for those at-risk populations.
I think that's something that we need to look at for, of course, for this summer, but like continuing on for those kids that I mean, that's amazing, right?
It is.
Years worth of growth in 20 days.
That goes back to what Grudmeyer was talking about with the smaller group, and you know, and they had more activities, but also the teachers had more time with each of their smaller classes, and I think that's really important to that.
Oh, most certainly. When we think about kind of throwing the rule book out and really giving people the creativity and the innovation to create those high levels of engagement, the delivery on those core areas was significant. And so, we can't forget those areas. We continue as well, per the board's charge. We met with our band and strings teachers in early August before the school year started. They generated a number of wonderful ideas, including arts fairs at our elementary schools, innovative ideas for class sets of band instruments for elementary kids to be able to try out. We also talked about how we can make those more affordable as we continue to broaden and sort of say there should be no barrier to your connection to arts and arts education. And so Dr. Fry and her team look forward to sharing more. Also, just two more things to share with you. We've been talking a lot internally about not using deficit language. As we shared with you in our ESSER presentation, we don't like the term learning loss. That's not, we're really thinking it's unfinished learning, right? We are in this space of really focusing on where we go and how we do that. And so we've done a bunch of work with the vertical alignment in terms of making sure that our teachers are helping to bring along that work, partnering with some professional development opportunities at NCAT, the Center for Advancement of Teaching. And again, it's allowing us to be far more intentional about how we make sure that we're supporting students in that linear bridge between courses and subjects. So again, I go back to my old English teacher self. When your senior English teacher is talking to your freshman English teacher and they are planning accordingly across that continuum of skill sets, we know that that's far more effective. And finally, we're using our MTSS, or our multi-tiered systems of support, to really target the assistance with those students who experience that unfinished learning, to make sure that we're being catalysts for that. And we've done a ton of training associated with it. So really proud of the fact that we are being intentional in our instructional efforts and our face-to-face learning opportunities. The fact that we are in school every day, face-to-face, and stabilizing that work is allowing us to do that in a really strong way. So we're proud of that work and glad to share it with you. And again, Dr. Fry will be back next month.
Thank goodness. No, he did an awesome job in her steed. Awesome job. But I missed her giving that update for sure.
Let me, can I interrupt just a minute? Talk about Dr. Fry not being here this evening. Some of you may not know this, but Dr. Fry's father is in very serious health condition at party at the present time. I think it would be appropriate for our board to send some sort of nice card or condolence to her in regard to her father.
Stephanie, can you do something from our board? Nice arrangement, something to that effect? Thank you. All right. Next up, financial statements. Bernie Sosha, and we're about done.
About done, yep. And I, too, will avoid deficit language in my report, and I will tell you that...
Yeah, you should be the one not saying deficit.
I don't like to use that language either. That is no fun.
We like it most when he does it, right?
Especially on this report right here.
Absolutely.
This is our local current expense report. As of August 31, just to let you know that so far for the year, we have $6.1 million in revenue received to $4.1 million in expenditures that have been made. And just as we're tracking, we're similar to last year, but even more so, we're similar to 2 years ago when we were opening all of our schools in regular operations. So we're on track to be in line.
It's early. Yes, ma'am.
Early, yes.
Bernie, we really appreciate those 83 pages. Whoever in your department did that, I mean, that's a lot of work. I've gained more appreciation for you.
Well, that's them. They have to send that to us, correct, for them to be able to be a vendor, don't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Send that detail report.
The vendor has to go through and sign a lot of documents to get
God's awesome.
federal contracts.
Any other questions for Mr. Bernie Sosha? All right, general operations.
Absolutely. And again, Ms. Case, our finance people are exceptional. They are exceptional. The only highlight that I have here, Mr. Craven and members of the board, again, a couple of dates as it relates to school tours. We love those opportunities to show off multiple schools in our system and invite the board to be in those spaces. You even heard from one of our teachers talking about that. But just a note for the board and for the general public, our October meeting is not on Monday. That's Columbus Day. So it is not October the 11th. We actually support the Education Foundation and their annual golf classic that day. We meet on Tuesday, October the 12th. So that's the one time we meet all year on a Tuesday and not on a Monday. So again, I just draw attention to everybody on that front. Again, it is certainly an honor and a pleasure to serve. We are proud of the work that we are doing every day and grateful for the support from the board. Thank you very much.
All right. If there's nothing else, Mrs. Holt, do you have anything else before we adjourn?
No, I do not.
Perfect. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second.